He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. And programming note, on Friday, Attorney General Andrea Campbell is going to be with us. And next Tuesday, Michelle Wu, the mayor of the city, is going to be with us right here at the Boston Public Library.
You know, by the way, a lot of you have asked about the interview yesterday, which we just loved, with Larry Tribe and Nancy Gertner. You could find, how do you find it on YouTube? There is not on the homepage on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com/GBH News, do something. I don't know what you do. Jamie will tell us in a second, and we can address your
and you know
request. What?
In addition to talking about the foreign president's legal problems, Larry Tribe talked about this study that they did that showed that there's $300 billion in money among the G7 countries that could go.
Seized assets from the Central Russian Bank.
Yes, it could go to Ukraine.
Yep,
and
huge.
Where they're obviously in a battle for their lives right now. So anyway, that's really worth finding out about too.
So we'll give you information on that in a minute. But first, the pandemic overhauled a lot of how we work, some for the better, more flexible hours, remote work, an increase in labor action demanding better conditions. There are also some inarguable negatives, including that workers now spend 2 full days of their entire week responding to emails. That would not be me. And sitting in endless meetings. That would also not be me.
No, it would not be you, Jim.
The rise of teleconferencing, Zoom meetings, is contributing to burnout. But many workers still say they value face-to-face check-in, at least according to the Wall Street Journal. So is the solution to just shorten all office meetings? Let's say set a 15-minute limit. If you can't hash it out in 15, why bother? Perhaps we should just put our hourly rate as our Zoom names so the bosses know exactly how much these endless meetings are costing them. The number for texting or calling is 877-301-8970. If we have to have meetings, and I guess we have to have some, can we at least limit them to 15 minutes? Or if you're a remote worker clinging to the community aspect that comes from a longer Zoom meeting, I guess you get paid either way. So in any case, 877-301-8970. I don't even know where you are on this issue. We've talked about it a lot through the years.
Well,
where's your position?
I don't like meetings. I don't think most people like meetings because nothing ever gets done in meetings.
Well,
I
not
think
nothing.
If you have to, well, they don't usually produce much. But if you have to have a meeting, I'd much rather have it in person. You know, kind of gather around a table than on Zoom. Because I think some people don't want to really speak up on Zoom. You know what I mean? And you feel maybe if you're a little shy, you might say something in a meeting. But you know, you are someone who obviously does not like meetings at all. I remember when we used to be at our, not this radio station, a prior radio station, we would have meetings every day after the show with our boss.
We did.
And it would be
you
me.
You can say her name, Grace. We love Grace.
Grace, yep.
Grace.
Matt Shearer, who's a big star now in WBZ.
WBZ, he is.
And John Parker, who's our current engineer now, and he was our engineer back then. We'd sit at the meetings, we'd go into the meetings, and our boss would begin the meeting, and mostly she'd criticize us.
Yeah, well, I think we were merited criticism.
Which was tough to take. Yeah. And after about 2 minutes, you'd get up and leave and walk out. You just walk out and leave me and Matt and John sitting there to fend off the criticism.
Well, you know, I didn't know you were going to bring this up. Let me just say this. You used to call me from your car on the way after I left. I did leave the meeting.
You did.
I thought I had been there long enough. And by the way, we were in a room that was about the size of one of these tables. It was really small.
We were like,
I got up.
Sitting next to each other. We were shoulder to shoulder.
But you know, it was unbelievable.
Matt and John and I were all squished on the couch together.
Grace never said, Jim, where are you going?
No, she never did.
She never said
walked
that.
out.
So Marjorie would call me after each of these meetings, whining, I would say, how dare you just leave this meeting and leaving us behind? What would I say to you every day?
I don't remember.
Why don't you get up and leave if you're not happy with the meeting?
You know, I was not going to get up and leave. But I think in general, people don't like me. You waste a lot of time.
So what is your...
There's a great line.
I am proposing an ideal meeting length. Obviously, it's a default. You can exceed it at some point. 15 minutes. How about 15 minutes?
Well, I think probably 15 minutes is unrealistic. But a half hour makes more sense because then you have time for the niceties. Like some people like to say, how was your weekend? Or they might want to show you baby pictures or something like that. So you can have time for little niceties before you get into the meat of the meeting. But on the other hand, the story that's talking about this in the Wall Street Journal says the death of your day is too many half hours, and maybe that's true too. So, I mean, listen, I've been in a job where I haven't had to do many meetings, and I'm really grateful for that.
877-301-8970. So what are your meeting stories? Some people love them, particularly with work from home. It's a way to connect with other people you don't get to see every day. Other people like me are not terribly crazy about meetings. I sort of like doing the work. One of the badges of honor, even I've mentioned this before, when Boston Magazine did a story about you and me a couple of years ago, Azita Garmani, who's one of our friends who worked closely with me on Greater Boston, a television show I used to do, was interviewed. The reporter asked her what she liked most about working with me. You know what she said? Shortest meetings I've ever had, and unfortunately it didn't make it into the final, but that is something I'm sort of proud of when I was sort of running the show.
Going back to W. Bush, he did a lot of things wrong, needless to say, including the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But one thing I did like is if the meeting was starting at 10,
this is a true story,
and you weren't there at 10, they closed the door.
Doors locked.
You weren't getting in.
You could be a cabinet
That's
member.
right. You weren't getting in. You weren't going to be late for any of his meetings. Here's what Paul says. To keep meetings short, have them in a small room with no table or chairs and no food. People will get out as quickly as possible.
Food is a big draw. I agree with
here's another text. If we could just go back to picking up the phone and having a conversation, half the meetings would never need to happen. I always remind staff when they're coming on board to where I work, I think, does this require a meeting or is this a phone call?
Well, that's how the meeting should start, by the way. Who's ever conducting the meeting should say, here's the sort of who, what, and why we're doing this thing. You focus on those directly. When you've done it, the meeting is over. 877-301-8970. We're focusing on the office meeting and your experiences in office meetings. Do you love them? Do you hate them? They are necessary, I guess, to some degree. And how about my notion that there should be a 15-minute limit? And occasionally you could exceed the limit, but the default notion, as I say, is 15 minutes and you are free.
Everything has changed now, right? Because people are not generally going into work. Some people are doing, there's more people going to work now. It's more people going to the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday deal. But it's changed how you meet. The idea of going into a conference room with everybody around the table is kind of out the window now. Everything's on Zoom.
Yeah, but a meeting is a meeting, whether it's on Zoom or not, if it takes up too much of your day. But it's really enervating to me. When you do a meeting and you're trying to hit your stride at work, such as it is, and it gets interrupted by a meeting. A meeting is okay, but an endless meeting that went on far longer than is necessary, doesn't it sap all the energy out of you? What are you laughing about?
I'm laughing about, this is a great point from Lena in New Hampshire. She's had these 30 years of meetings with the system, I guess, for her son's issues. And she said, I found that meetings can be good and positive, and then nothing happens. Then we have to have another meeting to discuss why nothing happened that was discussed at the previous meeting. And that is a great point. You want something to come out of the meeting. John from Shrewsbury says, the Queen of England, that would be Elizabeth, used to run meetings in a room with no chairs, and meetings were very short. Is that really true? I
never heard this story
I don't know.
before.
All I know about the Queen is that she carried a pocketbook with her everywhere she went. And I'm not sure we've ever solved the question
what was in it?
Of what was in the pocketbook, because you'd think she'd have a number of servants that could give her lipstick,
a very good point, Marjorie,
or her hairbrush, whatever she needed to have in her pocketbook.
Want to take some calls?
877-301-8970. Did I get that number correctly?
I don't know.
877-301-8970 is the number. Amanda.
You've only been doing it 10 years.
I know, but I had a little brain fog there. Amanda from Brookline. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Amanda.
I am so glad you're talking about this.
Well, thank you.
Last week we had a meeting with a group online, and it was supposed to be a half an hour. It went for 45 minutes, and I actually had questions, but I didn't want to ask them during the meeting because the meeting was already going over.
That's a very good point.
So I emailed the person that was running the meeting, and I said, here are my questions. And most of them were yes or no questions. He then wrote me back and said, let's schedule a meeting. So I said, fine. So I scheduled a meeting with him, and then I had a conflict, and I had to cancel the meeting. So I emailed him again, and I said, I'm so sorry, but it would be great if you could just answer my questions. Most of them are yes or no. And he wrote back a whole thing about how meeting face-to-face is better. And it's been a week, and I don't have an answer to these very simple questions.
Give us an example of what one of the questions was, Amanda, so we can judge whether a yes or no was appropriate. Give us an example.
It was about writing a piece of copy, and I didn't know if it was okay to use this piece of copy for multiple purposes, or if I should just use it for the one purpose.
Well, that's
yes or no
that's pretty much a yes or no kind of thing. Let us know how it goes. Stay in touch with us, Amanda. Thank you.
People get very upset if the meetings don't start on time and end on time, right?
But there's a problem. She just raised a really important thing. If the consensus is we want this meeting to be over, there's a real disincentive for you to ask a question. even if it turns out, I don't want to name names. When I used to be at NECN, there was one, New England Cable News, there used to be one person who was the most hated person in the newsroom because she, every single meeting, no matter how long it went, no matter how torturous it was, had to ask questions at the end, which just prolonged everybody's agony, you know?
James from Falmouth. What do you think, James?
Hey, James, welcome.
Hey, folks. So I used to work for Lego a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And what we would do is we would have Lego bricks inside every meeting room. And basically what that did was that helped people stay focused on what we were talking about. Instead of playing around with your phone, you were playing around with the bricks. So it kept us all focused. And if you felt fidgety, it was okay because you were still playing with the thing we were talking about.
Okay, James, tell me about this. Working for Lego, were there Legos everywhere in the office?
Apparently, yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So every meeting room, it didn't matter how big it was. If you were in the executive meeting room, there'd be several bowls, fish bowls, that are just filled with Lego bricks. And everybody was encouraged to just reach over, grab it in the middle of the meeting, and just start playing around with them.
During the meeting?
Yeah, why not? It's better to do that than to be looking at your phone and not be focused on what the person's talking about.
You know, by the way, the only analogy I can think of, Marjorie will attest to this. We've been in radio for a long time. Every meeting we're in, there are a pile of microphones in the middle of the table. And then they urge people when they get bored to just start performing. Start talking about a topic that interests you. So it's a variation on the thing. James, thank you very much for your call. We appreciate
That's
it.
another thing that's
What's that?
a little odd. When we used to actually be together is the person that would never show up at the meeting, and the little microphone would be in the middle of the table. And this person was a big cheese, so we'd have to wait for that particular
who was that?
At the Roll radio station, a guy that was a big cheese would never come in. He worked from home all the time.
You can say his name. He's dead.
Okay, Jay Severin.
Jay Severin, right.
Was a
I don't
big
think
star.
he'd be offended even if he was alive.
And so we'd all be waiting, like from the voice of God, from the little microphone in the middle of the table to weigh in. That was kind of a
By the way,
weird
that
thing.
was well before work from home. Nobody worked
It had
from home
nothing to
except
do with
Jay
work
then,
from
'cause
home.
He was a superstar.
Yeah, well, a lot of people work from home, like some of those big stars.
By the
they
way,
work from
you know
home.
what's interesting about his mic in the middle of the table? When he threatened your life, was that on the? He did. Was that on a little? He said in the old days he would have challenged you to a duel to the death.
Challenged me to a duel.
You said something
That's right.
that offended him on the
He
radio,
didn't
if I
like
remember
it.
correctly.
Yeah,
was that on a mic when he
yes,
said it in the
meeting
middle
where
of the table?
he offended my life. He didn't come in for that one
He
either.
didn't come in for that either.
It threatened my life. That
My
I don't
attitude,
think he
here's
meant
my
it.
view.
I think he was only kidding.
I'm anti-meeting. I don't think he was. Even though I am anti-meeting, here's my rule of thumb. Tell me if you agree with this or not. If you are going to threaten the life of a coworker, like was done at our old radio station, I think you should do it face to face. Do you or not?
I think they might have had him come in, but he was a big star.
Who had to solve that problem? Who had to drive to the North Shore to have dinner with him?
You solved the problem.
Just to
Thank you
calm
very
the
much.
waters between Marjorie and Jay.
Carrie in Southborough raises a great point.
What
Aren't
is it?
meetings really about justifying middle management's job?
Maybe.
Middle management is a tough place to be, right? People underneath you don't like you. People above you don't like you. It's difficult to be in middle management, I think. Liz Ann in the car.
Hello, Liz Ann. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're excellent. Thank you.
So there was a time where I went back and I calculated, looked at my calendar, where I was spending 7 hours a day on average in meetings.
Perfect.
Yeah.
7 hours a
was
day?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when did you
So
do
needless
anything?
to-
When did you do any work?
Exactly. Well, I would come in early and stay late because, yeah. So when I run a meeting, I always make sure there's an agenda so people know what the purpose of the meeting is.
I'm with you.
And there's always minutes produced so people know what the action items are and any decisions
Oh, I
that were
love that.
made.
Yeah.
And if you're late, I just kept going. I never recap because that drives me crazy. Somebody shows up late and then the person who's running the meeting recaps. I'm like, well, no, then you're saying it's okay to be late.
You know, that is brilliant. And that was, I don't know if you were listening when Marjorie mentioned that George W. Bush, when he was
Right.
president, even a cabinet
Yeah.
meeting, if you're a
Yep.
cabinet secretary who was a minute late, you get locked out of the room. Thank you, Liz Ann. That was a great call. How disrespectful is it that you show up late at a meeting when all of your coworkers are there exactly on time. And the expectation is either they wait for you or they repeat what you missed. How disrespectful is that?
Did you hear about Kim Kardashian?
No.
Well, she showed up late at the Beckham's wife, one of the Spice Girls.
Spice
She's
Girls,
a big
yeah.
designer.
Yeah.
I guess she had a big fashion show, and
Yeah.
Anna Wintour, who's the fearsome head of Vogue magazine and Condé Nast
happened?
and all that, she's sitting there, and Kim Kardashian came in 47 minutes late for the
Wow.
meeting,
That's
and
very
Anna Wintour snubbed her, Jim.
Wow.
Did not even look in her
That is
direction
intense.
or touch her. It was intense. It was
You know,
a big,
no one
big
is
story.
answering my question, which is, should all meetings be limited to 15 minutes? Why do you say that's
I say no. I
unrealistic,
think a
by
half
the way?
an hour.
If you get an agenda
Because
out,
15
if you get an agenda out to people in advance,
No,
so
you
they
know-
have an opportunity
yeah,
to
that's
think
right.
about the agenda.
You know why you need half an hour?
No, I do not.
Because people want to have the niceties.
I
They
don't
want
want
to
any
exchange. Well,
niceties.
some people do want to have
I
niceties
don't
before you
want
get into
niceties.
especially if it's a difficult meeting or a subject meeting that makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You want to have a nice exchange beforehand. The little politeness things going on, Jim. You know what I mean?
No, I do not know what
I
you
think
mean.
that's what you need is a half-hour meeting. But, we're taking calls, 877-301-8970. No, we're taking a break.
Oh, by the way, if you were looking for the fabulous interview, not because us, because of them, with Gertner and Larry Tribe yesterday, you go to youtube.com/GBH News, you click on all videos, and then you allegedly find it, could Donald Trump be disqualified from running for president? Also, you can just go to the Boston Public Radio Twitter page or my Twitter page, Jim Browdy, and you can click on. They are fabulous. They were fabulous. We hope to have them back together regularly, and Judge Gertner is kind enough to join us every week. Taking a break.
We're taking a break. You're listening
Taking
to
a break.
Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. This Friday, we're back at the library. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell's with us for an hour. Next Tuesday, a week from today, yes, Mayor Wu is with us for an hour for Ask the Mayor. We were inspired by this piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, I guess. Yeah, it's called The Art of the 15-Minute Meeting and How to Run One. We're talking about whether or not all meetings, office meetings, should be limited to 15 minutes. Yeah, how long that first segment of our show was today? I looked up.
20 minutes?
16 minutes.
16
Was
minutes.
that not
okay.
enough?
Well, it depends. I mean, sometimes you have big deal things to talk
Like
about.
what, for example?
I don't know. A big,
The niceties, is that what you're talking about? All the niceties kind of thing?
The niceties or some
Niceties.
important thing that's happening at the company. Sometimes
Okay,
it has to be
fine.
longer, but in general, you don't want to have meetings for too
Okay.
long. But listen to this one.
Yeah.
This is crazy. Oh, shoot. Now I've lost it.
Okay.
You're going to have to wait a minute until I find
I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, here it is. Donna on the road. I was in a meeting where one person appeared to be ill. So they got up and we thought they were leaving. But instead, they went over to the trash can, threw up, and returned to their seat.
That's happened in most meetings.
Can you imagine that? Oh,
Yeah.
Bruce in Westboro says, best meeting rule I've ever encountered. Anyone coming late to a meeting has to bring donuts to the next meeting.
That's a great idea. You know, by the way, you know what an example this is, which is not perfectly, it doesn't perfectly fit? When I was on the Cambridge City Council, arguably the worst 2 years of my life, and probably my colleagues too, Do you know what happened? I told you the Globe reporter, whose name I can't remember, who used to cover those meetings. What he said to me at the end of one meeting, he's saying what the worst moment is for a reporter who covers the Cambridge City Council meetings is when one counselor raises his or her hand to speak, because that means all 9 of them have to speak.
That's right.
That's another problem with the
That's
meeting.
right.
If you don't have anything to say, don't say it.
That's
Would you
right.
agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And so if you feel the need to talk, like that former coworker of mine at NECN who never shut up at a meeting, basically as a sort of a way to kiss the you-know-what of the employer, shut up. Don't say anything. Just listen, take notes, move on.
Jim in Gloucester. What do you think, Jim?
What's up?
Hey, good morning, guys.
To you.
Just a couple of things for meetings. Enjoy your show, but I retired from a major multinational corporation.
Yeah.
And we had 2 interesting things we did at meetings.
What's that?
One was called a stand-up meeting. These were for short meetings. There were no chairs in the room,
love
and it's
that.
amazing how fast you can get through it.
I think that's brilliant.
The second idea that we used was when the meeting time occurred, everyone who was there or everyone who hadn't shown up yet, their chair was removed into the hallway. So they had to stand up
That's
for the
great.
meeting.
That's great.
That is brilliant.
Well, it was, and it's amazing how well it worked. We didn't have to repeat it very often.
Jim, why can't you tell us the name of the company?
Well, it was called Siemens.
Oh, Siemens.
Oh, Siemens.
As in the furniture joint?
Are those the...
No, as in the multinational engineering company.
Oh, okay.
Don't
Okay,
they
fine.
do hard drives or something? Or
Well, it's engineer, whatever. Siemens is the place for me. How brilliant is that? Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much for the call. Chairs in the hall if you're not on time.
Here's Sam from Fairhaven. Many meetings are unproductive and outright unnecessary, but Jim, if it's true that you walked out of meetings, that shows total respect to your coworkers.
Disrespect.
That's right, disrespect, sorry.
Okay.
At my place of work, you would have done that once. If you continued, bye-bye. Sounds like you put yourself above the team, Jim.
Can I respond to that? That is correct. Now, I would just like to say
You
this.
did, Sam.
By the
You
way, for
nailed it.
people who think it's exaggerating, by the way, we both loved this boss. She was great.
She was great.
She was great. But these meetings were torturous. And they were torturous for 2 reasons. 1, because they were every day. And 2, because in those days we weren't doing so well. So essentially what she would do is she'd have these rating things on a computer, and she would go to the lowest moment of our ratings
That's
of the
right.
prior day.
That's right.
And she would click on it so we'd get to hear what it was.
Yeah.
Usually it was me talking. That was another reason. That was particularly painful.
Yeah.
And so what I did, I sat through the first 5 minutes
Yeah.
and I walked out. And to her credit, you got to give her a lot of credit for this. She never once called me to task or complained.
I mean, we all kind of went on like nothing had happened. You walked out. I mean, and we just sat there.
By the way, you were wrong. It wasn't Matt Shearer. Matt Shearer was our producer, who
Yep.
is the
He was there.
superstar
He was
piece.
there a lot.
No. It
Yes, he
was
was.
John, what's his face?
John Parker.
No, not John Parker. John Parker was there too.
John Rooney.
John Rooney.
That's right. John
who's
Rooney
now
was
a
there.
cop in
That's
Winthrop
right.
or something.
And Matt Shearer, who's now a big star at
He was there
WBC.
too?
He was there too. Yes,
Okay.
he was there too.
Well, obviously, it didn't stunt
We
his
were-
growth, did it?
John recalls them all.
John Parker still works. That's the John Parker who
It's a
still works with us.
PTSD situation, I think,
It
for a
was.
lot of us, John. Wouldn't you agree?
Hey, John,
PTSD.
tell us in our ear, how did you feel when I walked out of the room? Very proud of me. That's my guy, John Parker. Love you for that,
Yeah,
John. Let's go.
Just picture the scene.
What?
We're in this teeny tiny room.
How big would you
The
say?
boss,
How
I
big
don't
would you
know,
say it is?
5 feet by 8 feet or something. It was tiny.
It's
Like,
like
I
it-
said,
yeah.
we're all squished on the couch,
We are
shoulder to
squished,
shoulder on
yeah.
the couch. Jim, of course, can't fit in the couch, so
No,
he's
he
in his
can't.
own
Rather
chair,
large,
like
no?
the boss.
No.
And the boss is sitting with her hand on the computer, mostly silent.
Right above the keyboard.
She kind of wouldn't talk. She just
Yeah.
kind of sat there with her hand on the computer.
Yeah, she did.
And Jim, who is a big person,
I'm big.
just got up and walked out.
I
And,
did.
and closed the door very abruptly, and the rest of us sat there like stooges. Mike and Avon, thank you
You know,
for
wait
calling.
a second. Zoe's really got an issue that because she raised this. This is the second time she said it. Marjorie, this is a note from Zoe, our coworker. Marjorie, we can picture the scene. We do it every morning. We float a bunch of ideas, and some office hero keeps our meeting going by saying, "Next."
Yes, that's right.
That'd be me.
That
And
once
do I
again-
speed the damn meetings along, or do I not? Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to Mike and Avon. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Mike and Avon.
Good afternoon.
Hey.
I had to rearrange my doctor's appointment to make this showtime today, so I'm glad
Thank
you're
you.
on.
Hope you're well.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. I work for an engineering and manufacturing company. Used to. I'm retired now.
Yeah.
That love to have meetings with their new CEO. And I was an exceptionally busy, stressed out person. So I'd take my laptop to these meetings. And when someone started to bloviate and kind of meander on and waste my time, I just start typing away and do my work. And it usually worked out because people would suddenly edit themselves, cut to the chase, and get it done.
Because of you?
And I didn't
Wait. Because they saw what you were doing, or what?
Well, you could hear the computer clicking as I'm typing away.
That's pretty good. That's good.
Oh, very good.
Maybe you need to get to the point. So it also helped in another way. I got invited to far fewer meetings.
Yeah, that is a fine point, by the way. If you should, but I didn't get invited to far fewer meetings with our old boss. So wait a second. Was the boss who was running the meeting, he or she was not troubled by the fact that you were doing other work and making noise doing other work while his or her meeting was going on?
Well, even they would be a little, let's say, strained by the length of the meetings and how some people could just blather on endlessly.
Yeah, I've heard of people who blather on endlessly. Mike, thank you for the call.
What? It's usually the same person that does it over and over again.
It is. I said that woman I used to work with out at New England Cable News. Every single damn meeting. It was unbelievable.
You know, here's a solution, Jim.
What is it?
Their company had large meetings every month, program directors for a wide array of services. The meeting was an hour and a half, but if people wanted to chit-chat and socialize, they would come 15 minutes early. And if people were not interested, they would come 5 minutes early or even on time. So I guess that
What's with you and the chit-chatting thing and the nicety
especially
thing?
now, if you had a meeting in person with your colleagues that you haven't seen for months sometimes, wouldn't you want to catch up?
Well,
How
why
you
don't
doing?
you catch up
How
with
the
them on
kids-
your own
Well,
after the
because
show
you
or
don't,
in the morning
because you're
or
all
have a drink?
together for a meeting.
Yeah,
that's why you might
are.
want to catch up with people. Yeah. Anyway, Joe.
Have you ever been a manager? Have you ever been a manager?
No, are you kidding? I can't
Yeah.
manage myself. Never mind manage anybody else. Joe from Franklin, thank you for calling.
Very insightful point on your part.
It is.
Hey there.
Hi, what's your deal, Joe?
How you doing? So I just had a meeting last week, and we spent 20 minutes of the meeting talking. My boss talked about their vacation they just had.
Oh no.
And then we spent like 5 minutes talking about what we needed to know. Then we spent 15 minutes about their day off that was coming up and what they were going to do.
That's pretty
and
good.
I was like, I want to retire. I just want to quit.
So how was the guy's vacation?
Apparently, it was wonderful.
You sound really
Well, if it was Rick
enthused, Joe.
Steves, then I would say it would work, but I would guess otherwise not. Joe, thank you for an excellent call. We appreciate it.
Okay, we're wrapping this up because we got to talk with NBC Sports Trenni Casey. We have a lot of sports news. First of all, we want to talk with her about the death of Red Sox star and wonderful guy in the community, Tim Wakefield. The Patriots lose again. And Simone Biles, another superhero.
Did you watch that?
First for her. Yes, it was incredible. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She is Marjorie, and we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. This Friday, we're back at the library with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. She'll be here for an hour. And the mayor, Mayor Wu, will be here for an hour next Tuesday for Ask the Mayor. We're joined now by NBC Sports Boston anchor and reporter Trenni Casey. She's also a BPR contributor. Hey there, Trenni.
Hi, guys.
Nice to
Hello,
see you.
Trenni Casey. Great to see you. So let's start with the really surprising and very sad story, the premature death at 57 of the great Tim Wakefield, who was with the Red Sox for years, was a great guy in the community. I learned from the great also Dan Shaughnessy's column that he was just diagnosed with this brain cancer just weeks ago. Here's a highlight from the Red Sox 2004 ALCS Game 5 against the Yankees when Wakefield strikes out Ruben Sierra, ending a scoreless 13th inning.
A 3-2. The inning is over. Veritek holds on, and Wakefield, through all of that, pitches a scoreless 13th inning. How valuable is Wakefield to these Red Sox?
By the way, that was the year they won their first World Series in 84 years.
So
do you know Wakefield?
Just a little. You know, I did a story when I was with MLB Network. We did a story with him late in his career on how he was still throwing the knuckleball and how it's actually extended his career.
Mm-hmm.
But
because
he
far
was
less stress on the arm.
On the arm, yes. And he was great. I remember walking away thinking he was one of the easier athletes to interview. He was on time. He was personable. He, was easy to talk to. And then as I moved here, I didn't, spend as much time with the Red Sox, especially by the time he became part of the broadcast crew. And usually, listen, we all know that when you hear about people who get sick or pass away, behind the scenes, people are a little more honest than they are maybe on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. To a person, everyone whose life Tim Wakefield touched says the same thing publicly and privately, that he was one of the best guys, that he was involved in charitable work, some that you saw, some that you didn't.
Know, that's the key.
He was, a leader with the Dana-Farber Cancer Center, which ironically, I think both him and his wife had to visit in their lives. And he just was he was just a great guy. He was everyone liked Tim Wakefield. And it was an absolute shock to find out that he was sick just late last week. It was a shock in how everyone found out late last week that he was sick. And then to find out I think it was a Thursday that the news came out that he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of brain cancer, and he died on Sunday. And like you, Marjorie, I didn't know until I read Dan Shaughnessy's column that just a few weeks ago he was experiencing blurry vision. Went in, they did a battery of tests. They found very aggressive brain cancer. They immediately performed surgery. And again, I think it was in Dan Shaughnessy's column that I read that, while it was the cancer that got him, he had a major seizure, which led to his premature death.
We talked with you, I think, last week about the nauseating Curt Schilling talking about this on a podcast without the permission of Wakefield or his family. Has he apologized or said anything since?
Not that I could tell. So, in fairness, I was a little out of pocket. I was out of town back in the Midwest for a family wedding this weekend. But I looked immediately on Thursday. And late on Thursday. So after it was made public, we should probably tell you the story again. So the Wakefields asked for privacy. They asked that no one talk about. They only told people closest to them. And obviously members of the Red Sox organization that Tim was diagnosed, but also that his wife is battling, I believe, pancreatic cancer. And then so simultaneously, and they did not want it to become a thing. And Curt Schilling decided to go on his podcast on Thursday and say, because he's a man of God and he wanted prayers, he released their information without their permission.
And against their explicit
wishes. And then obviously Tim died 3 days later. And so after the Red Sox put out a statement, and after there were numerous reports that the Wakefields were furious that this happened, I went to Curt Schilling's X account to see if he backed off or said anything. I saw nothing at all. And now I don't know, I haven't been back, so I don't know if he has since said anything in the wake of his passing or if he has just chosen to not go on social media. But he has become he was, great baseball player, despicable human being.
I think that's fair to say. One little very sweet note, I thought. For people who don't know what a knuckleball is, you hold it in this weird way with your knuckles, and it goes really slowly.
Yes.
But it moves around in these weird kinds of ways, sometimes only 70 miles an hour, and compare that to a fastball, it could be 100 miles an hour.
Nowadays, over 100 miles
And when
an
you
hour.
see it, you can't believe that a batter can't hit every one of these things. There's this guy, George Kirby, who I never heard of, who's a pitcher for the Mariners, who apparently is a great young player. And right after Wakefield died, he'd never thrown a knuckleball in the major leagues.
And he threw one
and
in
he
honor of
And
him.
it really was so sweet.
Yeah.
He threw one, and afterwards he joked, it was 73 miles an hour, and he said how great he felt to do it. And he said he was just happy that no one hit it out of the ballpark. And there was a swing and a miss kind of thing.
Yeah, you have
but it
to
was a really
master
sweet
it.
tribute. I know. There are very few pitchers who do that.
But Trenni, he also, the trajectory of his career is interesting too, because I guess was he with the Pirates of Pittsburgh?
Yeah,
Pirates?
He was with the
then
Pirates.
He wasn't doing that well. He wasn't a pitcher though then, right? He was playing first base, I think, or something. And they sent him to the minor leagues, and then he came to the Red Sox, and he became, he bounced back and had this incredibly long career as a knuckleballer with the Red Sox.
Now, forgive me if I am remembering this incorrectly, but I believe that is when he developed the knuckleball. Is that it was a way for him to work his way to the majors, but then late in his career prolong his career in the majors.
Because maybe he wasn't doing as well as a hitter, which he originally was with the Pirates, and so he thought. So can we go?
Dad,
I'm sorry.
he and his dad used to practice this, I guess, when they were kids.
Yeah, he will be missed around that organization.
Okay, so moving over to the Patriots, I don't want to talk about how horrible the game was. It was just brutal. Marjorie always says to me, "Why do you say the same things over and over, Jim?" So having
Tom
said
Brady,
that, I'm going to say the same things over and over again here. I have 2 points to make about this. I listened to Bill Belichick's press conference after the loss, and it was the biggest loss of his career. He is the most childish, rude adult I've ever seen. And I have to say, I've said this before, and I'm not sure I would do it. The fact that your colleagues, reporters, have to sit in the room and be treated like garbage by this. He lost a football game, by the way. He didn't lose his family in a fire. He is so immature and so condescending. That's number one. It is nauseating. And I would hope that someone like Robert Kraft would say, treat people like a human being. That's what I try to do. Treat people like a human being. In case, that's one. Two, this is the point you said. Is there anybody in the world anymore that thinks it wasn't all Tom Brady for 20 years? I mean, it's so.
I don't know how you
The guy can't win a game without Tom Brady.
Okay, he's 26 and 29 since Tom Brady.
Is that what his record is?
26 and 29. I believe that also includes that playoff drubbing by the Buffalo Bills in 2021. He is not the same coach. Tom Brady allowed the Bill Belichick way to survive. And the Bill Belichick way is you build a winner on your defense, and you win in the trenches, right? You win with your running game, which sets up your passing game. I mean, they did obviously have top-tier wide receivers. Obviously Randy Moss played. Not
all the time.
But not all the time. I mean, even a guy like Julian Edelman, they found guys who worked within the context of the offensive
He was a
structure.
quarterback in college.
Julian Edelman was. But, they also had Wes Welker, and then they had Danny Amendola. They had all of these different types of guys, these little, as Tommy Curran on our station likes to call them, little water bug guys that could go over the middle. They were quick. They could, they could move really quick, side to side, right? But he always had, somebody. And Tom Brady, even if he didn't have a big name receiver, could make a receiver become a big name. One could argue that on another team, a Wes Welker, and you know what? When they went to other teams, Wes Welker and Danny Amendola were not as successful as they were with Tom Brady. But you do not have Tom Brady anymore. You have Mac Jones. And if you read the scouting reports on Mac Jones, they are that he is a high floor, low ceiling quarterback.
What's that
which
mean?
means he came into the NFL with enough tools and the brains to be a decent early NFL quarterback. But you need to surround him with weapons. A lot of people say that really Tua Tagovailoa, who right now is a quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, is kind of on the same playing level as Mac Jones. But you know what they've done for Tua Tagovailoa?
Given him support.
They drafted Jalen Waddle, and they traded for Tyreek Hill, and they have unbelievable running backs. Who on the Patriots right now are you if you're an opposing defense, who are you afraid of? So in turn, you're not afraid. I honestly think
the team stinks.
The team stinks. I think it's honestly been professional negligence, the way that he has managed the roster. And if I'm Robert Kraft, and if this team finishes with a losing record again, I say you part ways with
Okay,
them.
let's return to this for one more second. And again, I'm not saying I could pull this off, so I'm not disparaging
Yell at Bill
anybody.
Belichick in a press conference?
I have to say, I'll give you an example. I just realized the one athletic person I ever interviewed who treated somebody really, really poorly was Theo Epstein. I told you when at the end of a half hour. I never told you the story.
I don't think so.
When I was at NECN, I did a half-hour interview.
You didn't know who Jim was.
Well, no, don't make a joke about this, by the way, because he was appalling.
Okay.
He did a 30-minute interview in the weight room at, what do you call it?
Fenway Park?
At Fenway Park. And by the way, this comes on the heels of Marjorie telling me nonstop that his twin brother, who's a guidance counselor at Brookline High School, is the most wonderful young man who has ever walked. Everybody says that.
He gave a graduation speech at the high school. My kids were there.
In any case, Theo Epstein could not have been ruder to me for 30 minutes. Totally. And that's, by the way, I can live with that. Before the interview was over, before he went in the hole, and he could have waited 2 seconds, he starts trashing his PR person in front of all of us, my producers, my camera people, before he left the room. And I said something to him. I mean, it was so demeaning to this guy who everybody tells me. In fact, Shaughnessy and Barnacle told me, watch out for Theo, and his PR guy is great. I can't remember the guy's name. And I don't understand why someone doesn't say, why do you need to treat everybody like total garbage? Or why don't they sit there and ask no questions? There's got to be something when a guy with that amount, isn't he the highest paid coach in all of sports?
I would guess so. No one knows exactly what he's paid, but the guesstimate is around $25 million.
Does it bother you as much as it bothers me?
It bothers everybody. And it bothers everyone more now. Like, I think people were willing, and this isn't right either. When he was great and when they were winning all the time, I think people were willing to tolerate it. But now the tide is turning. And again, like, listen, you have to be a little careful, right? Because you've got to go in, and if you push back too much, the Patriots can, and if Bill Belichick doesn't want you there, they can revoke your credential, like not just to talk to him, but to talk to everybody. So you do have to walk a fine line. But to me, that is another level of, or another reason that if I'm Robert Kraft, I say, you don't treat people well, and you're not winning football games anymore. Like, what is the reason to keep you around other than you did something before? And listen, I'm not taking away anything. What Bill Belichick did while he was here alongside Tom Brady it's unmatched. I don't think any franchise will ever come close to that ever again. But you know what? You're not keeping up with the times, and you treat everybody like garbage. Like, it might just be time to go.
I would love it when they had a press conference and one of the reporters would say, Mr. Belichick, why do you have a bird on your head? And he would say, on to Cleveland. What happened? You're wearing a raincoat in the press conference. On to Cleveland. I mean, you'd always say like these.
Yes, on to Cincinnati was a big thing in 2014.
Excuse me, you were a pretty tough reporter in your reporter column. No, you were. I knew you'd make fun of this too. Would you sit there and take it?
I don't know what I would do. I think I wouldn't probably go to those press conferences but then it was different. I didn't have to.
Okay.
So
all right.
I will say, in the defense of, I will say two things on this. In the defense of the guys who are there and the girls and the women who are there, you're not just there for the access to him, you're there for the access to everyone, right? So one, you don't want to get your credential revoked, but two, people have pushed him more in the last 2 years that I've seen him pushed.
But by the way, I'm not suggesting. Let me just say one last thing, and then I promise we'll move on, Marjorie. I'm not suggesting one person puts himself out on the line. You get the sense that you all sports reporters have pretty good relationships with each other. Should all have a meeting and say, here's what we're going to do when he treats the first of us like crap next Sunday. We're going to do it as a group, and whatever it is, that's...
And you walk out.
In any case, let's move to
Just
something...
one last thing. Why are people's credentials revoked? Is that something that's standard throughout the NFL? That if the coach doesn't like you, then you get the
there have been...
That doesn't seem like a very...
There have been reporters who have been blackballed by Bill Belichick.
Trump, by the way, Trump revoked credentials of CNN reporers and other people during his presidency. It's a variation on the thing.
When you win and you make a lot of money and you're in charge,
do whatever you want.
You can do whatever you want.
We cannot leave the NFL without pointing out that Taylor Swift has managed to get more eyes on the NFL.
I meant to put this in. I'm sorry, I forgot to put the story in.
To the Super Bowl. We had 1 million pictures of her. People that obviously don't watch the NFL are tuning into the games, at the Kansas City games, to watch her in the stands.
Do you think it's all a scam, as a lot of people think, or not?
I don't know if it's a scam because honestly, I don't know what it would benefit her. Like she's
That's
already,
a good point.
she's already the biggest name on the planet. Like she doesn't need it. So I mean, maybe she's getting like some side payments from the NFL.
I don't think
but
she needs
Marjorie
those
is right. More, just a couple of numbers from this weekend. Female viewers, like teenage viewership was up 53%.
That's unbelievable.
18 to 24 was up 24%. 35 plus was up 35%. They saw 2 million more women viewers watch the NFL this weekend than in previous weeks, and it was the most watched Sunday television show, not sports show, television show since the Super Bowl on Sunday.
And by the way, for
Can you
those who don't
believe it?
know, the camera was on her twice the whole game for
Yeah,
a
they
couple
didn't
of
show her.
seconds.
Like NBC, I think, made a conscious decision to not show her as often as I think it was Fox who had the game the previous week, the Bears-Chiefs game. So they did make a conscious effort to not show her. And
Why don't
she
they
was
do one of
there-
those dual screen things where they keep the camera on her the whole game
Oh, I know.
in the lower right-hand corner, and then the game, which no one's
And-
interested
How about
in?
the game in the
And
lower
let's be
right-hand
honest,
corner? And Taylor brought up
it
big-
wasn't just her this time either. It was her, Ryan Reynolds,
Yeah.
Blake Lively, Hugh
Star-studded
Jackman. Like,
cast. Yeah. Our producer says the theory is she's trying to get new dating material for her next album.
I don't think
know.
she needs that either.
I don't know. I mean,
Can
she
we
did
move
date
to a
Maddie
plus story?
Healy, so
What?
that's pretty good
Well,
material.
this is an improvement, I think.
Yes,
This Travis
huge.
Kelsey guy. He seems like a nice guy.
Okay, enough. Goodbye.
And he was very funny on
let's
Saturday
move
Night
to
Live.
Simone Biles. I spent
This is
last
great.
night.
I bet
would
she's a
say
Swiftie.
I watched this about
I bet.
15 times
who really
last night.
isn't?
Okay. Here's the crowd roaring when Biles landed the most difficult. Here's a clip from the World Championships in Antwerp, Belgium. Well, you didn't get to see it, but you guys heard the kind of thing.
If you have a chance, watch it.
It's unbelievable.
I wish they had. I honestly wish though they had a clip online, and maybe I should have looked harder to find it in slow motion.
I
because her,
googled slow motion. I found it.
her power is so
It's unbelievable.
fast. Like the way that she flips in the air, it almost doesn't look like, oh, well, how hard can that be? You know, she's a gymnast, but what she is doing has never been attempted by a female gymnast before. So she has now invented 2 vaults that previously were just done by male athletes.
That's why this is called Simone Biles 2.
Yes, the Biles
because
2.
it's Simone Biles 1. You get it named for you the maneuver if you're the first person ever
to
do
it. Yes.
Good for her.
That's pretty incredible.
And you know what? And listen, I know she's only 26, but in gymnastics, that's quote unquote old to be 26, and she's still reinventing the sport at 26 years old. She got married this past off season.
Yeah.
You know, like she's in her late 20s. Like for her to still be this relevant, not just relevant, but competitive and winning everything she enters, we've never seen anything
Well,
like
you know,
And
can I
she's
say
such
one
a great young woman. She stood up to that creepy doctor that was one of
Yes.
the people that was
Larry
sexually
Nassar.
attacking
Yep.
all those gymnasts all
Well,
those
can we-
years.
can we-
The
but let's
stories
talk-
about her marriage.
let's
so
talk about-
fun.
She's married to a Green Bay Packers.
Yeah,
She
very
is.
cute.
Let's talk
very
about what
cute.
happened, though, during the Olympics. The woman goes in as the favorite. Compare this to Bill Belichick. She goes in as the favorite. She's going to win every gold. She gets what I guess they're called twisties, which
Yes.
happens to a gymnast occasionally.
When you can't see where you are in the air, like you don't have spatial recognition, which could literally kill you because if you fall the wrong way, you could break your neck.
Okay, and so she achieved none of the goals either she had or the world had for her before. Yet in her interviews, she was a total grown-up. She didn't demean the press.
Well,
She didn't
she's
have a scowl on her
she's
face.
a class act.
Well, exactly my point. Some people
Yeah.
in losing can act like grown-ups and be respectful, and she is fat.
I
No,
mean,
she's
yeah,
great.
but if we're being honest about Bill Belichick, he doesn't exactly act like all that great when he wins either.
With who? Him?
Yeah, it's not like
That's
it's
a
not
very
like it's
good
not like he's
point.
warm
That's
and
a very
fuzzy when
good
he
point.
wins, and then when he loses, he's a crank. He's
Oh,
always a
just
crab.
Cincinnati. I said Cleveland. I guess
It's
it was
okay. It's
Cincinnati.
just 2 Ohio's.
Cincinnati.
2 Ohio's.
Looking ahead.
Okay, so one more piece of good news here. Do you know what happened yesterday at GBH during our show?
I don't. And I was listening for
Celtics Media Day
Yes.
at GBH were all these black SUVs the size of this room.
Wait, Media
pulled
Day
up-
was at your
pulled up to the front. Well, something was our thing for hours yesterday, and I knew when I went to the Globe website, it said
Well, I
watch
suppose the
Celtics
Auerbachs,
Media Day live.
Yeah, the Auerbach
whatever it
Center is over that way.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Did you see this?
No.
Taylor and Simone Biles have a nice relationship here. Mutual
do?
admiration. Yes.
course.
Taylor Swift tweeted, "I cried watching you," meaning Simone. "I feel so lucky to have gotten to watch you all these
Wow,
years,
that
but
is
this
nice.
week was a lesson in emotional intelligence and resilience. We all learn from you. Thank you."
Wow.
Well, wait a second. Keep reading.
Worlds colliding.
Keep reading.
From Simone?
Yeah.
"I'm crying. How special. I love you."
No, not that. Read the third one.
What's the third one?
Bill Belichick, screw you both. I mean, is that really necessary?
If I thought Bill Belichick knew how to find Twitter, I would believe you. But
Okay.
No, but let's talk about this for a second. They're in the lobby. Everybody is excited, by the way.
Oh, yesterday with the
Yesterday.
Celtics? Oh,
Yes.
I know.
And
I actually saw a guy in his uniform there. I didn't recognize
a guy?
him. Now.
Which one was he?
I don't know.
What number?
Helpful.
I don't know.
I saw a really big tall guy.
He was a really big, tall guy
in
the
a green
lobby.
outfit
Yeah.
and
I said,
shorts.
oh my God, there's one of the Boston Celtics. It was very exciting.
Do you know what number he was wearing?
I don't know what number
No.
he was wearing. No.
Listen, they are co-favorites, betting favorites, if you believe the Vegas odds, with the Milwaukee Bucks to win the title. They had lost a little bit of ground when the Bucks traded for Damian Lillard from Portland,
Yep.
but the Bucks counter-moved, and credited to Brad Stevens, who put it on the
General
line,
manager
general
of the
manager of the Celtics, and shipped off a couple of future draft picks, plus Robert Williams III, who many people really liked, even though he was oft injured. When he was on the floor, he was a defensive presence. And then Malcolm Brogdon, who I think maybe didn't really love being here anymore because he was a part of too many trade rumors and also injured. But he shipped him away and got Drew Holiday, who is a guard that played for Milwaukee, won a title with Milwaukee in 2021. And he's like I keep calling him a grown-up Marcus Smart.
Yeah.
Like he is a good defensive player, an all NBA defensive player. Who sometimes struggles with his shot, but unlike Marcus Smart, doesn't think he should have the ball in his hands, in the final seconds. Like he will distribute the ball to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
So based upon just who they have on the team, obviously they haven't played yet. They're just about to begin practice. Are they the best team, consensus, best team in the NBA?
I think it's consensus. They're neck and neck with the Milwaukee Bucks. Like the Dame Lillard trade, although he is 34 and Chris Middleton is also another guy, it's like they sort of have a big three. I would say the Celtics' big three now, it would be, well, they kind of have a big four. They honestly have a big four because you got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and if Kristaps Porzingis can stay healthy, he's a really good shooter.
Well, I love Derek White too. I think he's
Derek
a great
White,
player. Maybe he's not a superstar.
He's not
before you
exactly.
go, the Red Sox finished at last place for the third time in 4 years. There are rumors the last couple of days the most remarkable player in the history of baseball, Shohei Ohtani, is going to end up coming here. That they're going to pay this guy.
I mean, it would be amazing. So I think
what's the word
rumors.
inside? Yeah.
So I think the rumors have significantly heated up. He has a very close relationship with the head of New Balance, and he has been a New Balance athlete for a long time. And so I think people feel like Boston is a place because he already sort of has. However, there are reports that he would prefer to stay on the West Coast because it's an easier flight to and from Japan than it is to be on the East Coast.
That'd be pretty exciting.
But at the end of the day, whoever's going to offer him the most money, he is an unbelievable. He would change just the excitement around this team in an instant.
For those who don't follow baseball, he is not only one of the best hitters in baseball.
He's a pitcher.
He's one of the best pitchers in baseball, which is just...
Won't be able to pitch, though, for a while.
I know,
because
he injured
he
his whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have Tommy John.
Yeah.
Okay, we've been speaking
Nice
with
to see you,
NBC
Trenni.
Hi,
Sports
guys.
Boston anchor and reporter Trenni Casey, who's also a BPR contributor. Thank you very much, Trenni. Coming
Be well.
up
Good to see you.
after the new news, Boston Globe associate editor and columnist Marcel Garcia is here with a really tragic tale of a Salvadoran mother who came to Boston for a better life, seemingly vanished into thin air, and all these months later, there is not a clue about what happened to her. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library, as we do every Tuesday and every Friday. We're streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. And we've got 2 little programming notes. We're going to be joined by the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. She's going to be with us this Friday here at the library. And next Tuesday here at the library will be Michelle Wu, the mayor of the city of Boston. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're joined now by Marcela Garcia, associate editor and columnist for the Boston Globe. You also have a great newsletter. What's it called? Mira?
Mira.
Mira, it's great. Nice to see you, Marcela.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Hello, Marjorie.
Oh,
how are you?
I'm sorry. I thought we were just applauding there for a second. I got carried away. So
let me try that again. Marcella, it's really nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Marcella, for being here. So let's start, not to break away from a jovial mood there for a second. You've done a great piece of reporting about a mother of 2 kids who came from El Salvador to get a better life after terrible problems there with harassment and all sorts of horrible things. And she came to Boston, disappeared many months ago, and we don't know anything about her. So tell people about this mother.
So yeah, to make a quick summary of the situation.
You don't have to make it quick, by the way. This is real. No, you did some great reporting.
No, I mean, I kind of wanted to start basically about a year ago. This woman went missing on November 26th, which is the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And I don't know if you remember, but around that time, holidays, late December, we had a very high-profile case of a missing woman, Anna Walsh, whose husband has been charged with her murder. That case was all over the news and sort of consumed the news cycle here and nationally too. It made national news. And then in mid-January approximately, I heard that there was this woman from East Boston who had gone missing on November 26th, and yet we had heard absolutely nothing about her case.
2 months.
About 2 months, nearly 2 months. And the reason why is because for some reason that we haven't heard, I have not heard a single explanation as to why the Boston police took a month and a half, nearly 2 months, to put out a public alert on this woman's disappearance. And again, as you and I know, everybody knows that when you have a case of a missing person, especially when it's a kid, when it's an elderly person, but anybody really, you always ask the public for help because this woman can be seen by witnesses, potentially, right? Can be spotted if she was kidnapped, or, people are on the lookout. And so law enforcement typically does that, but in this case, that did not happen. And again, to this day, I have not learned why that happened. So, fast forward 10 months ago, here we are. There has been no progress on the case. To my knowledge, there's not a single person of interest. And the problem, I guess, or the tragedy, I guess, is compounded by the fact that she was here alone. She had just arrived to the Boston area. She had months as a recent arrival. She moved in May of 2022. She had no family, no relatives here. All of her family is in El Salvador. And I think that aspect, even though it shouldn't, I think weighs in when, maybe in just generating public attention.
By the way, one of the great things you and the Globe did is you went to El Salvador and met the family. We want to hear those details. It really brings this story to life in ways that are really, really important. We should talk a minute about it. Gwen Ifill, I think, called it missing white woman syndrome. And I think we've discussed this a lot on the show. If you're a good-looking white woman, particularly if you're blonde, that helps too, then obviously there's wall-to-wall coverage. If you happen not to be white, your chances of getting play and getting any attention drop. But we have, I think next week, we're supposed to have the commissioner of the police department here today, Michael Cox, tentatively next Monday, but not resolved, but it'll be here soon. What is he going to say? What have you heard? What do they say to you?
So what they say to me is that they have been working on this case since day one. But
why didn't we know about it on day one?
They don't say. The only thing that they have said, not by way of explanation, but by way of sort of acknowledging the delays, like, yes, we could have done that before. We could have notified the public before, but for some reason, but the reason why they have not said. Now, you have to, like you said, missing white women syndrome. There's research, by the way, that women of color who go missing get treated differently. There's research. I'm not saying it. It's not, that does happen. And so, again, in this case, they have not answered as to why. I have asked the mayor, is somebody going to get be held responsible for this delay? Was there negligence? Because the family, rightly so, believes that there was negligence. And so, yes, I went to El Salvador to precisely with that intent, to put a human face to this story because of the fact that that there's no relative here who can bring. I mean, as you know, mothers who have their children missing, they go to the police station. They have meetings with the mayor. And by the way, to her credit, the mayor met via Zoom with the sister, the family. She did, like early on. And the commissioner was there too, by the way, I think. But again, nothing can really change the fact that there was a delay and that there's no progress in the case.
So tell us about what you learned about her. By the way, her name is Reina Carolina Morales Rojas, we should have said.
Reina Carolina Morales Rojas, that's right.
Tell us what you learned about her from her
family.
So
she's 41, and she has 2 kids, 2 teenagers, 14 and 16, and her sister, Alicia, who is really the one very determined to seeking justice and in communication with the police. And I just wanted to know who she is and why she left. And again, the intent was to sort of put a human face in an effort to also not forget the case and to alert the public again. Because all of this, public coverage is always an opportunity to remind the public that there's a missing person and that you may see her or not. So, but then again, I wanted to talk about who she is. She was a police officer, a cop. Over there, the law enforcement system is different. She was basically like a security officer for the city in Santa Ana. It's one of the largest cities in El Salvador. She lived in a very rural area, very poor. But with a lot of sacrifice, she bought a plot of land, and then she started building her own home. And that's where her 2 kids live now.
Building her own home.
Literally. It's
amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. And, of course, cost is different there. But she was determined to give, to have a home for her kids. And she ultimately decided to go because she had several instances of sexual harassment that has been documented. I saw all the documents. And then ends up coming here, was working. Really working as in 2 jobs, almost like getting extra hours here and there because she wanted to pay. Obviously, she came here, she was undocumented, and as you know, a lot of people pay smugglers, right, to get them here, and so she had that debt.
She paid it off.
$10,000.
Like $10,000. Yeah, that's
which
a lot
is kind of like the average of what they charge. So anyway, and so then again, because I wrote this, again, it's been 10 months since she disappeared. I reached out to the police, I reached out to everyone, and even when I reached out to the police, there was this snafu in which first the Boston police told me, you know what, the Massachusetts State Police has taken jurisdiction of the case, which was news to the family, because I called Alicia and I said, have you? And she's like, absolutely not. And she was rightly so angry because she hadn't heard. Now, we don't know what that means, but it sounds like a significant change. Then I get a different note clarifying that, no, actually, that's not the case. We all share, so jurisdiction is shared by several agencies, the Massachusetts State Police, the Boston Police, Somerville Police, because she was last seen in Somerville, even though she lived in East Boston, and the Middlesex District Attorney's Office. So it's, that part in and of itself, like forget about everything else, like the fact that they made a mistake, just identifying who has jurisdiction of the case seems to me like a pretty, I don't know, I don't want to say, it's just, I don't think, and then they said,
I'll say it, it's outrageous.
I mean jurisdiction is not that complicated.
Well, also, if you tell a reporter that it's the state police, when in fact your own agency, the Boston Police Department, is working on it, don't you think you'd know that?
I know.
If they were working on it,
I know.
Don't you think? And which suggests to me that.
So exactly, what suggests, and so what message does that send to the family? And I have asked the police this over and over again. Don't use, this has an impact in the community as well. The community, it damages the trust that communities of color have in the police. And they have pushed back. And so I'd be interested in how.
The police department?
The police has pushed back because they, to me, it's an instance of gaslighting, honestly, because they say that by me saying that there's a trust issue, I'm creating the trust issue. And so I'm like, no, this is your job that you didn't do. correctly, and now you have an issue that you're refusing to acknowledge. And by me talking about it, it's not going to change anything. I'm reporting what I see on the ground. And so what's interesting is that Alicia, the sister, kept telling me that she feels that because there's all these agencies involved, each agency, it's like a hot potato. They keep passing the ball around. And that's exactly what happened with the jurisdiction issue. And so I saw it play out, and it was very disappointing and ultimately outrageous. And all, it's just such an insult to a family that's grieving.
Is there any?
And
I'm sorry,
I just want to say too. I mean, this girl, the little girl Charlotte, the 9-year-old that disappeared in New York State.
Yes,
obviously she's a kid, but they, as you point out, they do these Amber Alerts very quickly for missing people in general.
This was the kid in the campground.
This is the kid in the campground who was biking by herself, and it was incredible what the authorities did. They were pinging the cell phone towers. They had hundreds of volunteers. They had that missing person, task force go down there. So Saturday night, and when you think of a 9-year-old girl, you think that being abducted by a stranger, you think very bad things are going to happen. But because of this intensive law enforcement effort, right away, they were able to find this child safe. And you think about what you just said. I remember when there was a terrible case in Coolidge Corner when a woman was raped, and they found a picture of the truck going through the cameras in Coolidge Corner at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. I mean, the instant Amber Alerts really do make a difference.
It's impossible to quantify, and of course you can't prove what didn't happen, but you can't help but wonder what would have happened if the public had been alerted right away. And so it is just astonishing that this has happened. I mean, I was going to say that the kids, they're very. Imagine it's like they lost their mother twice. They lost her when she came here. They didn't want her to come to the U.S., and then they lose her again in just such horrible circumstances that we don't know about. So,
I don't know Michael Cox very well. I know a lot about him because of his history with the department. And I have to say, based on my limited contact, I have great respect for this guy. And it seems to me the minimum that is entitled is a straight answer to your core question. I mean, if they screwed up, then they should admit they screwed up and say we're trying to make. But there is an answer to the question.
I do wonder whether there's a liability issue here that they don't want to admit. And I get that, just going back to your point, Marjorie, that the kid that just went missing, I get that law enforcement have different rules when a minor or an elderly person is involved. But in the case of Carolina, I have talked to law enforcement experts, and I talked to a former Boston police lieutenant who told me that you immediately alert the public, especially when you know that you suspect that there was foul play involved. And in this case, you had all these elements because she was someone who was always in constant communication with the kids or the sister. It was very unusual. It was behavior that was completely outside of the norm, and the police should have caught that, and the police should have said, okay, there is reasonable suspicion to believe that something happened to this woman. We need to ask the public for help. And I don't want to overestimate what the public might or could have done or not, but still, you want to activate all your resources available when someone goes missing, and so that did not happen.
Do you have any indication they're getting anywhere on this, or do you not know?
No, nothing. They won't say anything. I have asked, can you give me any metrics? How many people have you investigated? How many tips have come in? How many leads have you followed that, even if they have get you nowhere, give me some sort of metric to give to the family, right? So that they believe, because they don't think that the police is doing their job, so that they know that you're doing something, but they won't, because they always, how they always cite, we don't discuss investigations that are active or open, and so that's the line that they cite.
You know what this reminds me of? This Alicia, the sister, who's got to, with your help, keep this in the public's eye, and we'll try to do a better job with your help to pass along information. Sure. But we should have done more, frankly, ourselves. It's like Steve Johnson, who was here a few weeks ago, the Hulu series, the Cambridge guy whose brother was killed in Australia, and the cops said suicide, and only through the relentlessness from thousands of miles away was Steve able to get the cops and a private detective and others to finally pay attention, and ultimately decided he was murdered and caught the murderer.
Again, there's patterns. Women of color poor women, an immigrant woman.
Gay guys in Australia.
But he was lucky enough to have a very wealthy brother
that could afford
these resources.
But at the time all these gay guys were killed off that cliff, there was a wild bias against gays and lesbians, particularly gay men.
I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, can you imagine? This didn't make it into my story, but there was a recent case in Lynn where a Latino young man went missing, and the family felt that the Lynn police was not doing their job looking for the guy. They hired a private detective, and the private detective found his belongings, which eventually led the police to his body.
That is unbelievable.
They hired a private detective. And so the other thing that didn't make it into the piece is that after I did the initial columns on Reina, the Globe newsroom, one of my colleagues, Hannah, did a broader story about how here in Massachusetts there is no standard for missing persons. The data that law enforcement agencies collect it's just a hodgepodge of regulations, and so there's no data to track women of color, precisely because, again, we had just seen this high-profile case of Anna Walsh that received all this attention. And so after that piece of investigation, the Office of Governor Healy announced that she was creating a missing persons unit out of the state police. So last week, I reached out to them and I said, because when the Boston police told me, oh, the Massachusetts State Police has jurisdiction, I reached out to the governor's office because I thought maybe this new missing persons unit has this case. And so they said, no, we haven't started yet because we didn't get the funds. The legislature didn't give us the funds. And they said, we're trying to find the funds somewhere else. So that unit, by the way, is still not up and running.
So let me get this straight. The governor approved of it, wanted to start it, and the legislature wouldn't give her the funding.
Oh, it wasn't in the budget. Yes,
it wasn't in the budget.
I don't really know who dropped the ball or whose fault it was, but they don't have the budget. The unit hasn't started, and so they're trying to find the funding somewhere
else. By the way,
else.
People should read. Your reporting is fabulous and important here.
Thank you.
The most recent story with the Dateline El Salvador, missing East Boston woman's family speaks out after 10 months with no leads. You should read it, and it's great you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you for allowing me to talk about it here.
So we're talking to Marcelo Garcia from the Boston Globe. You're about the fifth person we're going to have a conversation about temporary protected status being granted by the President of the United States to nearly 500,000 Venezuelans. And obviously the connection here that people think about is those 49 or 50 Venezuelans that the despicable Ron DeSantis nabbed or kidnapped, depending on your point of view, in Texas, and then ended up bringing them to Martha's Vineyard in the hope that the people of Martha's Vineyard would mistreat them, and they did exactly the opposite. But the question that we have asked Governor Healy, we asked Ayanna Pressley, who is the co-chair of the Haiti caucus in Congress, is why just Venezuelans? I mean, for example, Governor Healy said how important comparable status for Haitians would be, particularly in this state. We asked, again, Ayanna Pressley this the other day, and here's our little back and forth.
Why is the administration, the Biden administration, not just doing this?
Look, right now, what I will say is that I don't know. That is the answer, okay? I don't know.
I don't think I've ever heard Ayanna Pressley say, I don't know to anything, because she is relentless. What is the answer to the question? Why is it just Venezuela?
It's political. Again, 100% they could have done this with Haiti. They
without
already
congressional
did.
approval.
Yeah,
the president
TPS.
Can do this,
So TPS, there's two things about TPS, is the designation, redesignation, or the renewal. It's always 18 months, right? TPS was already to Haitians last year. And so, but that has a cutoff date, meaning that the recent arrivals, the ones that we're seeing here, do not qualify. And so what the Biden administration can 100% do today, redesignate Haiti, so that the people who have come in the last few months, that have come here to the state, many of them, can get access to this immigration relief protection from deportation and an immediate chance to get a work permit. They're not doing it, again, for I think it's political reasons. And I think it's interesting because I heard Congresswoman Pressley being guarded because every Democrat right now is in a position of criticizing the president as he runs for re-election or not. And Governor Healy did. Mayor of New York City did, Eric Adams, which is how they got TPS for Venezuelans, because there's a huge influx of Venezuelans going into New York City. Here we're seeing a lot of Haitians. Haiti is interesting because there is this line of thinking in immigration policy that when you do this type of things, they are an incentive. They work as an incentive for people to come. And there's this word, deterrence. And so in immigration policy, there's always this really, really innate focus on deterrence. And how you do deterrence is you get people not to leave in the first place. Because, but then what they want to do is sort of start to close the door at every single step of the way. Someone is not going to turn around and say, oh, they're doing this, I should go and apply on my... No. In the middle of the Darien Gap, the jungle, someone's going to be, moved by what the Biden administration does or doesn't do. No, these people are fleeing for their lives. Then the Haiti question is complicated because domestically, the country is really, really in a chaotic position. It's just overtaken by violence, gangs, and right now I think it's, again, political. The Biden administration doesn't want to perhaps open themselves to criticism that by extending or redesignating TPS to Haitians, they're going to create a situation in which more Haitians are going to come. Breaking news, they're already coming.
But, it seems to me, and we used to talk with Ali Noorani about this.
Yeah.
We talked to him about immigration stuff. And by the way, he's got a great newsletter thing or a Substack, too, called, I think,
he does.
I didn't know that.
Cranky Father or Cranky Parent.
Something like that.
It's pretty great. It's about being
Ali's
a father.
great.
It's
Yeah.
great. He is great. But we used to say to him, why don't people like Joe Biden use the business community more? The business community doesn't have any workers. A ready source, if they had work permits, are many of these migrants, like we're talking about right here. Go to the business community, said, you want your workers? Then you got to go tell
why they don't
Republicans to shut up when I do this.
The business community is still getting their workers. I mean, people are working without work authorization. And so this is the biggest, unkept secret in immigration.
So you don't even think they need it?
No, some of them do, and some do get involved in the advocacy part of things, but everyone always comes out really, really disgusted by the nasty politics, right? And so, I remember last year, or 2 years ago, there was this huge effort from the farm and milk dairy farmers in the Midwest, and they got involved and got nothing. And they were like, what is, this is insane. It makes no sense. And so, again, people are working. The Venezuelan 50, the Vineyard 50, how they call them, the 50 Venezuelan migrants who ended up in the Martha's Vineyard, they all started to work right away. And so they now are eligible for TPS, but you find work because you have to, and people need workers. And so there are always workarounds, and that's the thing that we don't talk about.
Marcel, your reporting on this woman was spectacular.
Thank you so much. Thank you for amplifying it.
Well, please stay in touch with us about it.
Very, very much. The headline in the Globe is East Boston's Mom's Disappearance Highlights Disparities in Coverage of Missing Persons. You should check it out. It's also on Axios Boston as well. Thank you very much,
Great to see
Marcella
you,
Garcia,
Marcella.
Associate Editor and Columnist for the Boston Globe. Coming up, Lee Pelton, President and CEO of the Boston Foundation. He's going to talk about, Supreme Court got rid of affirmative action in colleges. Well, now opponents of affirmative action are aiming at diversity in the workplace as well. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie, and we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Friday, the Attorney General joins us at the library for an hour. That's Andrea Campbell. Tuesday at the library, the Mayor Wu, joins us for an hour. And by the way, during that segment, we were talking about the Boston Police Department. We're very pleased to say that the commissioner who had to cancel today will be joining us next Monday. Michael Cox will join us. And obviously, among other things we'll speak to the commissioner about is this missing woman from East Boston. We're joined now by Lee Pelton. He's the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation, previously served as the 12th president of Emerson College, also a member of GBH's Board of Trustees. Lee Pelton, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Hello, Lee Pelton. Thank you very much for coming in. So everybody knows now about the Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action in college admissions. Now apparently opponents of affirmative action, including state attorneys from a lot of Republican states, are going after diversity in the workplace. These attorneys going after Microsoft and Walmart about their supposedly race-conscious hiring. So what's going on here?
Well, I mean, Edward Blum, who led the charge against Harvard and UNC, had made it clear that he was on a mission to confront corporate practices as well as being racist, as it were. And so he's living up to that promise. And then we know that there are some governors and it's the 13 AGs of 13 states have also warned Kellogg and some other Fortune 500 companies that they should be very careful about how they use race in their corporate offices. If you look at the language, there's a lot of which they misunderstand. Racial quotas have been illegal and disallowed for a very long time. So they mentioned, they said, well, you can't do this. Well, they've never been able to do that. I think on the one hand, it's if race is used explicitly for hiring or recruiting and leaves out other groups, then you may find yourself in trouble. One other thing I should say.
What?
I'm not a lawyer, but one needs to have a plaintiff who has standing. And so it's not like anybody just off the street. Who's been harmed. And it shows that they've been harmed. So it's not like anybody can walk off the street, up to an office and be a plaintiff. You have to have, as Jim says, a plaintiff who has standing and who can show or seek to demonstrate that they've been harmed. So there's some limits to this.
Let me stay with this for a couple of minutes. To be clear, the decision saying that race cannot even be a factor in higher ed admissions does not apply at all to anything out of higher education. That all experts agree. Correct. The question is, will Blum and his allies be able to get the court ultimately to decide to expand this to the corporate world? But as of now, the law doesn't prohibit these things. But the two things I want to say. There was a wonderful report on NPR this morning about this organization called the Fearless Fund.
Oh, yeah.
Let me just read you.
They've hired a lawyer.
Yeah, they have. Let me just read about what the Washington Post says about it as well. In early August, the group, meaning Blum's group, whatever it is, filed a lawsuit against Fearless Fund, an Atlanta-based venture capital firm run by two black women, alleging the fund is engaging in racial discrimination by running a grant program exclusively for early-stage companies owned by black women because black women haven't been able to get the funding, et cetera, to start their businesses. It's to fix a wrong. Ultimately, by the way, a panel of federal judges blocked the fund from awarding any grants as of a couple of days ago. That's one consequence. So already judges are priming this for a Supreme Court thing. The second thing is, which is equally troubling to me, Lee Pelton, is the chilling effect just these threats and litigation by Blum's organization have. You know this. You ran a university. You've run lots of organizations. Lots of places, including profit-making corporations, say, even if this is technically legal, I don't want to take the chance that in 2 years I'm going to be sued and have to spend $400,000 on lawyers. So they draw back on what is otherwise legal to basically insulate themselves, which in my opinion is a nightmare.
Great, and that's already happened. After George Floyd, there was a huge influx of dollars, millions of dollars, for diversity programs, in corporations across America, and they've already begun to pull back. I think the best thing that corporations can do is what colleges and universities should be doing, is to look at their policies very carefully, look at the language very carefully, and make make amendments to it, but continue to say what their values are. That we value diverse communities. That's part of the template of being an American, and so on. So I think you can do both of those.
So you know what they should do? What Deval Patrick said at the Democratic National Convention a bunch of years ago? Grow a spine. Like, do the right thing, and if you get sued, you get sued.
As soon as you find out that Stephen Miller is involved in this whole thing, I mean, we remember Stephen Miller from the Trump administration. He was that unctuous, creepy guy that you wouldn't want to, be alone in a room with. He had a bee in his bonnet about immigration from the word go, and he's involved in this America First legal group, and they're, getting involved in all this. On the other hand, the people from that Atlanta firm, that Fearless Fund, they've got Ben Crump as their lawyer.
They do. I forgot about
You've seen him on television a lot. He's done a lot of work for families whose kids have been, or family members have been wrongly shot by cops in cities around the country. So people are fighting back. But you know what struck me? I listened to a podcast, one of my favorite shows. We broadcast it here every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on the media. And they did a thing about Leonard Leo, who's been the bucks behind this Federalist Society, and he's organized it. Republicans are very good, or conservatives, maybe Republicans too, have been very good at organizing things, like the long view, the long view. Yeah. And I don't feel Democrats are nearly as good at that. This Leonard Leo thing is very fascinating, because basically now he's not only stacked the Supreme Court of the United States, he's stacking state courts all around the country. While it seems like sometimes the Democrats are just, asleep at the switch.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us would share that view. I do want to say this, that these attacks against affirmative action are not new. They're part of a war that's been waged for a really long time, and it's a backlash against a perceived advancement, which I guess they interpret as perceived advantages that people of color have with respect to employment, with respect to college admissions, and nonprofits like the Boston Foundation. We're also vulnerable to these. We will be vulnerable to these attacks as well. We're actually hosting, I think it's on October 11th, a panel discussion around the program that just mentioned this VC fund that's run by two Atlanta-based.
Oh, great! The Fearless Fund.
Yeah.
Oh, terrific.
Fund, yeah.
We're talking to Lee Pelton, head of the Boston Foundation.
One last thing about this. I mean, I've worked in news organizations all my life, and obviously, I was like unusual when I started because there were no women. So obviously, women look at things totally differently than men look at things in a lot of instances. If you're black, you're looking at things very differently. If you're Latino, looking at things differently. There have never been enough women or African Americans or Latinos or ever even close to power and I've been a reporter now for going on 45 years. It's never close. So it's like, what is everybody so worked up about? You know what I mean?
Well, listen, you're right. I mean, here are the facts. Women and people of color account for, I think, about 14%.
Tiny.
14% of all of the people who are in C-suites in corporate America. And if you look at lawyers, practicing lawyers, 4% of practicing lawyers are black. I mean, so it's not the case.
They're taking over. They're just taking over.
If it's a zero-sum game, it's not because of women and people of color. They're not taking any slots away from, or opportunities away from other people.
Well, let me quote the great Marjorie Egan.
What?
It's Fox News, great replacement theory. This is just a foot in the door, and those people are going to replace us. I mean, that is the line that Fox et al. Have been pushing for forever, and I think that's why.
But in the real world, there's not a whole hell of a lot of replacing going on.
Well, there are a lot of things in the real world that aren't real that doesn't matter, particularly the Supreme Court. You know, we've talked to you a lot about the racial wealth gap in this community. We've mentioned a million times that you, in concert with the Fed and some other organizations, are working on a multi-year project to update the Federal Reserve data that we talk about a lot, and we should talk a lot about. $247,000 wealth for a white family in Boston in the mid-teens, 2015, 2016. Black family, what was it, $8? Latino, Dominican family, $0, that sort of thing. But you've done some work on one of the largest contributors to this, home buying, particularly first-time home buyers. What did we find? What did we find out?
Well, first of all, we've created a table of leading bankers, financiers, from the government, funders, researchers, and analysts. There's about almost 40 of those people we've been meeting for almost a year now, to close the racial wealth gap by expanding home ownership among people of color in Greater Boston, and so that's what we're seeking to do. We're going to be focused on expanding, trying to support any expansions of the housing supply, down payment assistance, and also making greater access or creating greater access to a variety of mortgage products. So we're going to be focused on those three very specific areas of building home ownership.
And I think you reviewed some of these state programs that have the same goal, and I think the conclusion was they're making progress, but there still is a large gap, maybe the greatest gap in the country. But when I was reading about that, speaking of our first topic, why are the state programs that are targeted to helping people, low and moderate income people of color, to buy homes for the first time, why are they not susceptible to the same sort of legal challenge we were talking about 5 minutes ago?
Oh, because I'm not sure. I don't think that those programs would fall under either the Titles 7 or 6 of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
I thought I read in the report on your study, maybe I was wrong, it's something like 95% of the beneficiaries of one of the programs were people of color. Yeah. Isn't that a red flag for the blooms of the world?
It could be. But
you're not
Stephen
worried
Miller,
about it.
No,
he'll be in town.
No, but listen, we're not setting quotas. We're not setting goals. We have aspirations. And I think that's still allowed. I know that's still allowed. That's even still allowed among colleges and universities. So having diversity aspirations is not the same thing as having quotas and specific goals. And so we're not.
I know when you come here, since you're the head of the Bulls, you love when I give you suggestions about things you should do. So I'll be happy to give you.
Hey, listen, that's why I come here.
That's why, exactly. I know. I can't make those meetings, so he says, Jim, please give me. I was just reading the story one of the things we talk a lot about. We talked about it in this context of rent control with Mike Connolly.
Oh yeah. Home
about
rule?
Why does the legislature have any authority over what a local government does within its borders? Well, one of the things that only Boston has to worry about are liquor licenses. And in light of the fact that the legislature decides apparently that even if you're a state rep from Fitchburg, you run Boston, there are almost no liquor licenses in communities where there are restaurants owned or want to be owned by people of color who want to start a business. And as a result, you don't need me to tell you, the most profit-making part of the restaurant, we've heard from 1 million restaurateurs on our show, is liquor. And if you don't have a liquor license, you're probably not going to survive. Mayor Wu, with the support of the city council, is up there saying, let's have 250 new liquor licenses. By the way, the request, in my opinion, should be get out of this business and let us decide what's best for our constituents. Isn't this would be a huge boon for people of color who are trying to get in the restaurant business and survive. Why are you smiling at me like this?
Well, because it's such a modest proposal what she's asking.
It is
and
modest.
it's not 250 all at once. It's over
5 years.
five-year period.
Right.
So.
Well, forget the proposal. The whole liquor license issue,
Right.
you should be all over, shouldn't you?
Well, maybe we should.
Okay.
But we understand it's an issue. It's 7 communities. It's Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, West Roxbury, Hyde Park, East Boston, and I'm missing one.
Where
of
there are
those.
almost no liquor licenses as compared, for example, to Seaport.
Has 80.
Where they're
right.
swimming at them.
Right, exactly.
That's right. Okay.
So-
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well, you don't sound that enthusiastic about it.
Oh, I am. It's just, we can only take one thing at a time.
No,
Can't do
that is
everything.
totally untrue.
Can't do
By the way,
everything.
we'll revisit this next month.
but-
We're going to talk to the mayor about this on Tuesday, too. I agree with you. It's modest. It's sort of like a rent control proposal is modest because she knows how impossible the legislature is. And she should be able to make decisions with the city council about what's best for the people.
By the way,
of
and
the city.
I hope I'm not revealing something that you don't already. Do you know who Daryl LaMonica is?
A former football player.
No.
Who?
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Who is he?
Daryl LaMonica was a police officer, or wanted to be a police officer, in Boston.
Yeah.
And Boston went to the state as part of a home rule petition to waive that requirement.
Oh, we just read
for-
about this a few weeks ago.
For
actually.
him.
Yes, that's right.
One
For just
person.
him.
One
That's right.
person. And of course, it
Forgot about this.
to create a state law to allow this happen. And I think it took a half a year for him, I mean, that's kind of absurd.
No, the home rule thing is sick.
Wait
It
a
is
minute.
really-
Wait a minute. I did not read about Daryl.
They had to get some
LaMonica.
kind of waiver. Was it a residency thing or some section?
No, it was just an age requirement.
Oh,
they
that's
were
what it
asking
was.
for a
That's
waiver
right.
for a wage
Right.
requirement for him so he could become a police officer.
Because he was too old?
He was either. It's probably
he was too old.
He might have been too old or too young. I'm
Okay,
not
too
sure
old or
which
too young.
one.
He was
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
did they get it? 6 months? I mean, 6 months is pretty fast for the legislature to move,
Yeah,
actually.
well, that was, he got it done, I think, in maybe 5 months. but
So
not
are you
much
saying
more.
that it was quick for the legislature to move or slow for the
No,
legislature?
he's
I
saying
don't
it's
know.
outrageous that they
The
have
whole
to do.
thing
Aren't
is
you?
outrageous. I mean, the whole thing is
I
outrageous.
didn't say it was outrageous. I said it was
I'm sorry.
curious.
Excuse me.
Curious, yeah. It's curious. Well, sometimes you can get things faster done if it's involving police officers. Sometimes
Yeah.
law enforcement, you can get things
You know,
faster
can
done.
we stay on
Can
racial
talk to-
wealth gap for a second?
Okay,
you have
we
a
haven't
new,
talked about the United.
No, I want to talk about
Okay.
who you hired to run this deal because this is something we talk a lot about. You're,
that's right.
Yeah, we've got a new director. She is just amazing and wonderful. We're really lucky to have her. Her name is Courtney Brunson. She's a fairly recent grad from Harvard Law School, went to Mount Holyoke. She has roots here. And she worked for Senator Elizabeth Warren for a while, especially around housing and home ownership issues. So she's very steeped in this. And she was, when she was at Harvard Law School, she was president of the Student Legal Aid Society, I think, for 2 years.
Oh, Harvard Legal Aid Bureau.
Yeah,
It was great. Yeah.
So she's great.
So can you explain, I know what exactly is the mission of this part of the Boston Foundation? What is the breadth of work that this racial wealth gap thing that you have, what is supposed to happen out of there?
Well, as I said earlier, our mission, our purpose is to close the racial wealth gap. You alluded to one of the statistics by creating home ownership, because home ownership is the largest component of wealth on average for individuals and families.
But that's not the only thing you're doing out of this center, are you?
No, that's it.
It
That's
is.
it,
Oh,
yeah, that's it.
focusing on home ownership.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. We'd love to have Courtney Brunson on the show, by the way, so maybe
she's terrific. Yeah.
that'd be great.
She's
We'd love to talk. Okay,
Okay, well, we were going to talk about the United Way, but we're out of time. I guess we can do that next time we talk.
let's talk about liquor licenses for a few minutes. Before you go, I want to get this clear out of you. There is no defense for, I know it's a pet thing of mine, for the legislature to be making decisions about things that only matter to people within an individual city or town. Is that as obvious to you as it is to me?
Well, it is.
Yeah, it is.
obviously.
I figured it was.
Because, of course, Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline wanted to keep rent control back in 1994 when Sturbridge and Fitchburg and Framingham voted against rent control. It had nothing to do with them. It was just
Even
those
though
three
they didn't
cities
have
and towns. People in those cities and towns wanted it, and it's gone, and it's changed the whole fabric, I think, of those towns in a very, very short time. Now it's become impossible to buy anything.
But just think, I hope, because I say it in the way I say it, that people don't think this is like a comedy bit. I just think for a minute, people trying to start restaurants in this community need a liquor license to prosper, and they can't get a liquor license even if Mayor Wu and all 13 city councilors want to give them one, unless a majority of the men and
That's
women
right.
who don't represent
I told
Boston
you, it's
say
an
yes.
anti-Irish hangover.
That is
this was
exactly
because
what
all
it
the
is.
WASPs didn't want
That's
the Irish
exactly
to get too
right.
many liquor licenses in town. And I think we've all been behaving ourselves
Why don't you get
quite
Lee
well.
Pelton to comment on that too?
You're behaving yourselves now. I don't know back then, but I would just want to say something on
Please.
a happy note.
Oh yes.
Yes.
So there's this wage gender
Yes.
wage equity
Yes.
bill
We discussed
pending,
it with Shirley.
and
Long,
they're going to vote on it tomorrow, and we're very hopeful that they will pass it. Keith Mahoney, Ted McEnroe, and others on our team have been very much engaged in the legislature on this bill, and it's a significant bill, and will be a significant triumph.
Well, if Keith and Ted have been working on that, let me just give them advice too. They have to tell the legislature to vote on it before they take their 5 months vacation next year. Can you? Oh, there's Ted. Will you make sure you pass that along?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
Nice to see
Thank you
Lee
very
Pelton.
much.
We really
We've been speaking
appreciate
with Lee
it.
Pelton, President and CEO of the Boston Foundation. He previously served as the 12th president of Emerson College. Up next, our media maven and local survivor of attempted coyote attack, Sue O'Connell, will join us. We're going to talk about TV for dogs, and we're going to talk about naked TV. Apparently, Jim knows all about the show. He's been watching it for weeks. You're going to fill us in. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the library, streaming on facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Friday, the Attorney General's here for an hour. Next Tuesday, here being the library, the Mayor Wu, is here for an hour. We're joined now by our media maven, described as a local woman, which she is by the Boston Globe, Sue O'Connell. Sue's the co-publisher of Big Windows of the South End News, co-host of NBC 10's Boston at Issue every Sunday at 11:30. Hello there, Sue.
Good day.
Good day
Thank
to you,
you.
too.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
before
obviously
we-
don't have enough cousins here today. so-
Apparently you don't.
Okay.
Before we
Put the word
get
out.
to Naked Attraction, Jim's favorite new TV show.
No, it's not my favorite
You
show.
wanna
Don't
discuss-
do this.
Okay, okay.
It's not my favorite.
It's not your favorite.
Second
I did watch it.
Second one.
Top four.
It's not my
Top
second
four.
favorite.
Top four.
Before I get to that, I understand you want to add something to the anti-Irish. Irish needs not apply. That we misbehaved
Yeah, you know,
to make all these rules.
one of my roles now at NBC 10 and NECN is to sit in the corner of meetings when the new kids come from across the country. We've got a new wonderful political reporter, Matt Pritchard, who has joined us from D.C. and the West Coast, and my co-host of At Issue, Corey Smith, who comes from D.C. and from Texas. And when they say, "Why is it this way?" I get to say, because the Irish, so the reason why we have these home rule petition needs
That's
and
right.
why we can't make our own decisions in Roxbury about how many liquor licenses I might want in Fort Hill so it can become a more vibrant community, it's because the Brahmins were blocking the Irish from the power when Honey Fitz started to become mayor and the push started to become. So the legislature, which now we would hope is more equitable, is not changing, and they're still treating Boston citizens specifically like they're children, and they need permission to make their own decisions. And I think that this liquor license issue is emblematic of the problem that we have in Massachusetts. Even though we have all these Democrats that are all supposed to be working together, it's just really a problem.
Beautifully put. Now let's talk about
You're
naked
absolutely
attraction.
right.
Naked and afraid.
Absolutely
Now,
right.
there is a show on HBO that I've been reading about. That
about?
Can you excuse me with this? I know she's going to do. Did you already say it was my favorite show?
You went on for like 20 minutes this morning.
Well,
at the
maybe
meeting,
I did go on for
describing
20
in
minutes.
detail
I might have gone on for
what
20
we would
minutes.
see on this show.
Okay, it's
I,
because
of course, have not watched it.
I did it as a journalist because I knew that we were talking about. Okay, so HBO has this new show that they bought from some British something or other.
7 seasons in Great Britain.
7 seasons, and here's how it works. It's a dating show. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let me just give you a feel for the beginning.
So
I watched episode 1. Episode 1, there's a woman who would like a date. Okay, so far,
Correct.
typical dating show. And there's 6 men standing behind these like foggy glass who hoping that she picks them for a date.
Correct.
So far, typical dating show, right? Okay, the first thing that happens after a little back and forth between the host and the woman who wants the date is they begin, which is understandable, we want to learn something about the men, is they lift the door, the glass door on the front of the 6 men. And like any dating show, the first thing you see are 6 penises staring at you directly on the stage.
Yes.
Is that a fair description?
That is a fair. I would like to say I have been avoiding watching this show, and then because I was going to speak of it today.
That's my excuse.
I had to watch it,
Thank
and
you.
I have seen more penises in the past 2 weeks than I may have in my entire life, I have to say. So thank you, Jim Browdy, for that. I could go into great depth and description of the variety that they now come in.
Who knew? Who knew?
So,
here's a clip from the dating show. Let's play a little clip to give you a mood. It's called Naked Attraction. It's streaming now on HBO Max. Here it is.
Are you ready to play the game? Welcome to Naked Attraction, the dating show that likes to let it all hang out. Can picking a partner based solely on natural beauty help you find the one? Bring it on. When we're entirely unfiltered, what do men and women really find attractive? We are going to reveal them to you bit by bit. Are you ready for this?
Okay, fine. Let me explain. I'm going to explain a little more before we get your thoughts on this.
And bits.
Now, first of all, the first person who wanted to date was a woman. The next guest was a bisexual woman.
Yeah, and the host is bisexual.
Right, and the next show was a guy. So it's all kinds of things.
Not just women.
So what you do is first, based upon your perception of penis, is you eliminate one of the people,
right?
Which is sort of sad. And then they move up the thing. You see their abs. You eliminate somebody else.
Yep.
When the woman who wants the date narrows, or the person who wants the date narrows it down to 2 people.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News.
Thank you very much. It's huge on Morning Edition too. By the way,
They're too
They'd love
upset
it
we're
there.
talking about this.
Okay, so once you narrow it down to 2 who you might get a date with, you, the person who wants the date, has to go backstage and get naked yourself.
2, right. Only fair.
What do you think
It's
of that
only fair.
portion of the show?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about this show, Jim.
Please.
First of all, I love that in America, people are a little upset about it, and meanwhile in Great Britain, it's been on for 7 seasons.
Exactly.
Right?
7
seasons. 7 seasons without a lot of uproar in Great Britain because
Very popular.
in Europe, they care a lot less about being naked than we do
an
here,
excellent
right?
point.
So,
Thank
you know, they used to have on page 3 of the tabloids the naked people,
woman,
the naked woman, and you can think in the commercials, if you're ever in Europe and you turn on TV commercials, especially in Paris, where I know you've been, Jim, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so explicit. And as
Really?
Yeah, I had a friend who went to the beach in Spain once and said all the children under 10 have the same bathing suit at beaches in Spain. There's a boys version and a girls version. They're all naked. Like there's nudity everywhere except here. So I did appreciate that the idea of this was not just, they're not all beautiful people, and I put this in air quotes.
You're not going to say this is great because it fights against body shaming, are you?
No, I'm going to say that it's no better or worse than all these other dating shows that I now have to add this show to that I watch. The, Married at First Sight and the Love is Blind and the 90-Day Fiancé, which I could go on because I watch them all.
I'm sure you do.
It does sort of make it less sexy.
Yeah.
I mean,
I thought it was totally unsexy.
yeah,
there's
no
sexy about
sexual tension.
There isn't?
No, it's almost like an anatomy course to some degree.
Oh.
And people are explaining what they find attractive about these certain parts. You have to look at the bum too. They have to turn around and look at the bum. And it is fascinating because what the person is expressing they like has nothing to do with what we would say would be, a sexy body or a TV body or something like that.
And they show the face at the end.
At the end,
Yeah.
So and then they actually get to talk to the person.
Can't believe you didn't watch this for the show. You're supposed to watch what we talk about.
Yeah, this is
Remember we
important.
talked about bits
Bits
holes
and
I remember
souls?
very well. Of
Yeah,
course I do.
what you watch.
But anyway, it's interesting to me. I mean, it's just the difference between, Europe sensibilities and American sensibilities. All the trash that we have on TV, this is kind of the least.
Well, except my thesis, we're not going to spend much more time on this, don't worry, Marjorie, is you put a naked body on cable in America or streaming, everybody's going to watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of series. I don't want to get people upset about Game of Thrones. I know Game of Thrones is great. I would argue that Game of Thrones had the numbers it had, not just because it was a pretty great show, is because they featured rape, which some people like, which is sick, a lot of nudity. Americans really, I mean, we do this. We're not the Brits, as you say. That's a huge draw. This show is deadly dull.
Yes.
It is it's cringeworthy, and it's one of the top 5 shows on Max. I mean, that's huge.
No, well, I have to say, as much as I was bracing for what it was going to be,
It was worse.
the number of penises I saw in the first 10 minutes was really overwhelming.
You're focused on that a little bit.
Okay, well, I was right
It is
there. I
what
was
it
looking
is,
on the big screen
Staring
at
right
home.
at you. I
Let's
got
move
it.
on
I
to a
was worried
TV
people
show.
driving by might go, "What's Sue watching?"
Yeah, there are a lot of people who get behind, which is dog TV. This is TV
I never even heard of
aimed
this.
at dogs who are lonely now because they were adopted during the pandemic. Now everybody has to go back, or some people have to go back to work full time. And the idea is to keep your dog occupied while you're gone. Here's a song that Dog TV wrote about how dogs spend their day with Dog TV, supposedly wagging their tails.
My human leaves, and I'm on my own. I'm just a pup, not fully grown. I hear that fun, familiar tune.
All right, there's a.
It's Dog
it still
TV.
goes.
My fun starts soon.
By the way, Zoe just wrote us a note and said it sounds like Mike Connolly singing the rent control song.
Gosh.
Oh, yeah,
I
that
think
was
that's
yesterday.
that's accurate. Yeah,
So I'm suspicious.
There's
Do
a
you
lot
think
wrong with this. First
Dog
of all,
TV?
not wrong from a
Does Maud
morality
like it?
standpoint.
Does
No,
Maud-
Maud, who's actually having surgery today.
Oh.
So let's have she'll be okay. She had a little bump on her back.
Maud's her
but she'll be
dog,
fine.
not her
Maud's my
daughter.
dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. There's a lot wrong with this from a dog perspective. Number
wrong
one,
with it?
dogs can't see color. Okay,
they can't.
The only color dogs can see is blue.
Is that
right?
true?
It truly is.
I didn't
So
know that.
if indeed you really wanted to make a show for dogs, it would be something like The Simpsons, which has a lot of blue in it. Like
That's
dogs.
right.
Does?
Plus, dogs have a hard time looking at images that are not 3D. That's why when you see a dog that watches tennis on television or reacts to cats, it's rare because they don't really see depth. If it's flat and there's no blue, they're not going to watch it.
Okay.
Right?
So you think it's a scam?
This is for humans.
Oh.
This is a show.
Wow.
This is for humans. This entire
Now,
network.
hold
And
on.
people in the article in the New York Times are talking about how they're watching it and their dogs aren't. Now, in my family growing up, we always left the TV on for the dog when we went out. And
Yeah.
it didn't matter what it was
A
on.
lot of people do
The
that,
sound.
actually.
Yeah, the sound is on, or
Right.
it keeps it company. And when Maud was little, I put on the YouTube music calming station for her when she was little. I have no idea if it worked. But this is just a way to... And somebody actually tried to do this like 30 years ago. Tried to
don't you-
launch a dog puppy channel.
But don't you ever notice that barking and howling seems to attract dogs? Like,
Yeah.
remember when your kids were little and you watched 101 Dalmatians
Right.
on TV, and there was that section where the dogs were all howling to each other
Yes.
to get the group together to go in and rescue the Dalmatians?
We occasionally play Maud howling to Maud, and it totally freaks her out. Like she's totally like, where am I? What am I doing?
Yeah.
But I think the audio part of it might be interesting, but I think this is just a channel for humans.
By the way, for Maud, if people are saying I recognize the name, Maud became famous because it was Maud and Sue who were chased by the coyote.
That's right.
Which caused you to be named the local woman in
by the
Boston
Globe who couldn't call me by my name.
Can we go to a
though.
serious topic? I'm really
Delisted.
dying
Yeah.
to see where you fall in this thing. There's a case making its way on the Supreme Court that doesn't come out of Florida like you might think it does, but comes out of a town in Massachusetts, Ludlow, I believe. Can you describe the fact pattern and
Yeah,
what you
I'll
think
try.
about
And
it?
there's a number of cases. I think there's a number of cases that are going along with this. And these parents are suing. I think they lost the case, and obviously now it's going to appeal to the Supreme Court that they didn't want their child to use pronouns that were not the child was biologically born with. And the school district said that they could or they couldn't, and it wasn't a big deal. And now we knew that this was a case that they were going to bring to the Supreme Court. So of the cases that are going to be in this session, one of them is whether or not parents have the right to dictate, you'll correct me if I'm wrong on this, to the schools what pronouns can be used. But it's a bigger case. It's a much bigger issue. And I think it becomes an issue around children's rights and what's
a children's rights versus parents'
rights. You know what, and the government's rights when they are educating and have jurisdiction over your kids. Like many of you know, when your kids turn 14 and you go to the doctors, you know, for their annual physical, you're asked to leave the room for the first time.
Yeah.
And a lot of parents don't like that. But the reality is, this is the age when your child should be building a relationship with a pediatrician, should be able to share things that they don't want to share with you. The other issue with this case is, what can schools teach? Like, do parents actually have the right to go into a school district and demand curriculum or demand how their child is taught? You know, also, if your kid wants to play basketball and you don't want your kid to play basketball, does the kid have the right? I mean, that's not in this case. But it just opens up this Pandora's box of discussion that's hinged around this, you know, ridiculous argument about whether or not your child can pick their own pronouns.
But you know, I would like to say that I totally am respectful of a young kid. I think in this case, one of their kids is 11, who was having issues about gender identity, talked to the school about feelings of depression, according to the Globe, low self-esteem, possible attraction to the same gender. The teachers, this is from the Globe too, spoke with the child's mother, who responded that she was getting the child professional help and asked the school staff not to have private conversations with the child. I have no idea what the state of the law is. But this is one of these, I mean, when it's all these cases that are restricting the rights and ability to get adequate treatment for trans kids, it's an easy question.
Right.
That the state is discriminating against these families and these kids. This, to me, is a tougher one.
Yeah.
I have to say,
Yeah.
I'm trying to put myself in the same position. My kid's 11. My kid is telling the school some issues that she has about gender identity and that sort of things, and depression. On one hand, I want my kid's rights protected, and maybe she doesn't feel comfortable talking to me, so she has somebody comfortable to talk to, at least in her opinion there. But the flip side is I don't want to be left in the dark either when it comes to my young child, not my 16, my young child. So is this as tough a question for you as it is for me?
Absolutely. And as soon as this case came into the news, I had that reaction, because focusing on the gender identity and the pronoun thing is really, I know that's what they're pushing forward, and I know there's a political agenda around this. We can't, you know, diminish that anti-trans activism is what's driving this. But on the other hand, the result of this case is going to be far-reaching when it comes to who has jurisdiction over your child, and does your child have jurisdiction over themselves? You know, when do we allow children to have rights? Right?
Well, we're going to talk to Nancy Gertner about this, Judge Gertner. There's no question in my mind they'll come out on the parents' rights side, but I think you touched on an important point. Do they limit it to the narrow facts of this case, or do they do this huge parents' rights, Ron DeSantis kind of decision?
But But Ron DeSantis has taken away parents' rights in Florida because he says parents don't have the right to make medical decisions about their kids who are trans.
That's a very good
so
point.
how can it be parents' rights on pronouns and not parents' rights on medical decisions for your child? And if your medical decision is involving trans rights and they say you can't have that, well, how about your kid's cancer treatment or something else?
And what if, and this is a case that was in the news at one point, what if your child decides to cancer treatment, your child doesn't want the cancer treatments, right? What if your child
They've had enough chemo.
I've had enough. I mean, I have a kid who has had numerous invasive treatments. I have been lucky in that she has always agreed to them. She has always done them. She has always completed them. But what if one point she said to me when she was 14, I don't want to have this treatment?
That's a great question.
Right? And I'm legally allowed to have her have the treatment, right? I'm allowed to force her to have medical treatment. But what if she didn't want to have the treatment? Doesn't she have the right to do that? And so this is what this case, again, it's an anti-trans effort. There's no doubt about that. But this is one of those Supreme Court cases that has, again, I'm not a legal expert, but could have wide-ranging ramifications and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's like when can the government come between the parent and child, and when can the government not?
And what rights do children have?
And what rights do children have is the third spoke. So,
and what rights do parents have? I mean, this is a really complex.
Schools.
By the way, if you want to check this out, and I would suggest you do.
Politico did a great job on it,
They did.
too.
And Stephen Foote, F-O-O-T-E, and Marissa Silvestri are the Ludlow parents who brought this case.
So, in a much more important matter, where is Melania Trump?
Oh, that's actually a good question.
We're going to talk to John King in like 4 minutes here about Trump in court and pouting, and we haven't seen Melania in any of these court appearances. Trump is
or anywhere else
by himself. So what is going on with Melania?
Has she had enough? The most successful immigrant in the history of the United States, Melania Trump.
That's right.
Who, I have heard from people who have heard from people that she's fine. She's just going to live her life. This was kind of her grand plan all along. She never has to see Donald. I mean, can you imagine going to court, like being accused of any of the stuff that Donald just just pick one, and going to court without your family? I mean, can you imagine your spouse being accused?
Always holds hands on the
just
way
at least
into court,
to pretend, to put up a front or to be seen with,
Senator
to try
Menendez, he was holding hands.
Always humanize them, but she has.
Well, she's a fellow defendant, his wife, Menendez's wife. So that's a little different.
Well, she would have been there if she weren't a defendant. They always come in holding hands.
But it's just, Melania I think she's just done with Trump. I've seen reporting that she's redone her prenup agreement.
Well,
so that if this court case that's going on in New York right now, which again is cracking me up because we're hardly even paying attention to it because he's got so many court cases we can't keep track and we don't have enough airtime for it. But if he starts losing significant amounts of his income, it looks like she's protected and she's good. So
she wants to protect the Baron,
right? Of course,
the
Baron,
son that we haven't seen in ages. And I don't know what he's up to, but I think she's very worried about there being not a big enough trust fund left for Baron and possibly for Melania herself.
So good
and
for them.
She's seeing the fortune possibly disintegrate in front of her eyes, and heaven knows this is not what she bargained for.
Not at all.
When
If
she
you're going
married
to make
Donald,
you're going to make that deal with the devil, you want to make sure you got $1 billion in the bank.
Exactly. So that's where she may be.
I think she's kind of happy. I think she's like, you go off with your hobby, ruining democracy, and I'll stay here and raise our son.
It is a first. I mean, the politicians, even when they've been accused of these terrible things involving women, they always show up with the aggrieved wife.
Did you see that? We only have 30 seconds left. Did you see it? Was it in Michael Lewis is writing the book about Bankman-Fried?
Yes.
Did you see? Apparently, in that book, there is a report that Bankman-Fried offered through channels $5 billion to Trump to not run for re-election.
And he said no?
Well, it's unclear.
I've said this.
Apparently,
listen, I've said this on Twitter. If y'all want to get together and contribute $5 million net to give to me, I will go away. Okay? You'll never hear from me again. That's all I need. So.
Bankman-Fried's trial is starting today. They're picking the jury,
it does,
right?
That's right. And Trump's day, too. That look with Trump leaning forward like a tough guy, glaring at the judge with that pursed lip thing of his, which he rehearsed in the mirror in the morning while he's putting on his orange makeup.
I was going to say, I hate to pick pick on him and Rudy Giuliani for their tanning and their hair dye, because I have the same issue. If I get caught in the rain, I'm going to look just like Rudy Giuliani. But I got to tell you, if you don't have people around you, to make sure you blend it into your hairline.
Excellent point.
Absolutely.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Sue O'Connell. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, our media maven, Sue O'Connell, co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, co-host of NBC 10 Boston's At Issue every Sunday at 11:30, right after Meet the Press. Thanks, Sue. Coming up, speaking of John King, CNN's chief national correspondent is going to join us in just a second for the latest on Court TV. That would be Donald Trump in one court, Hunter Biden in another, and General John Kelly corroborating all the insults Trump aimed at Americans who gave their lives for their country in the military. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7, GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. This Friday, we're back at the library. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, spends an hour with us. Next Tuesday, we're back at the library, and Mayor Wu spends an hour with us. We're joined now on Zoom by CNN Chief National Correspondent John King, host of All Over the Map, a terrific project tracking the 2024 campaign through the eyes and experiences of real voters who will pick the next president. John, it's good to see you.
Greetings from Milwaukee.
Oh.
Hey, oh, Milwaukee. Oh, my goodness, Wisconsin.
That is correct, Marjorie.
I've never been to Wisconsin before.
It's it's a battleground state, Marjorie. You should come out here sometime. I'm spending the day, actually, it's really interesting. I've been here a couple of days, and I'm going to spend the next couple of hours with some community organizers in the black community, people who do it 365 days a year, not only in election years, so that when they're knocking on that door a year from now trying to convince people to vote, they recognize the face. They have a relationship to try to turn them out. It's a fascinating challenge. The president of the United States, is going to have a big challenge. Obviously, black voters are his most reliable constituency, but there's a lot of in the community. Inflation, the impact of COVID. They don't see results on criminal justice reform and things like that they want. They don't like Trump. So that may be Biden's saving grace in turnout. But so it's just the beginning of this project, and so it's a fascinating place to check in.
Well, before we get to your checking in with voters in Wisconsin and Iowa and New Hampshire, which you have been doing for days now, it's kind of court TV day. Donald Trump is in court in New York, scowling straight ahead. Hunter Biden, we saw him walking into court this morning. He's facing these gun charges and possibly tax charges. But it's kind of, I guess, another day, I don't know. Is there any big message from either of these cases that we should take home with us?
It's interesting. The conversations about these cases, it really depends on who's having the conversation, I guess, and how you want to put it into context. I'm not here to defend Hunter Biden, but what Hunter Biden is accused of is quite serious. It is not anywhere on the scale of what Donald Trump faces. Number one, in this civil fraud trial, which essentially says his whole business is based on lies and cheating, and does that undermine his brand as the quote unquote, multi-millionaire, billionaire deal maker or whatever? And then there's there's the actual criminal cases against Donald Trump. And yet, if you talk to a lot of Republicans, essentially their argument is everybody does it, or, they're all crooked. And Trump has used that to his advantage with his people. They're not equal. Again, I'm not defending Hunter Biden, but on the scale of 1 to 10 of sort of where these would rank, Hunter Biden's down at the bottom, below 5 anyway. And Donald Trump's, when you add it all up, is way up here. He's both innocent until proven guilty. But in an odd way, Trump just puts this in his casserole of everybody's crooked, everybody does things, but I'm your guy. And with a certain constituency, cynically, it works for him.
You know, John, I know you're not a lawyer, and we broached this with our regular guest every week, former federal judge Nancy Gertner, the other day. I don't understand. The case is so, I understand there's a different standard of proof in civil cases and criminal cases. Preponderance of the evidence versus beyond a reasonable doubt. Obviously, the criminal standard is far higher. But if the judge in this fraud case against Trump that may cause him to lose virtually all of his holdings in New York City was able to conclude that massive fraud had been committed without even testimony, just summary judgment by the judge himself, that leads me, not as the former lawyer I used to be, but as a layperson, to say that Alvin Bragg, when he decided to drop this criminal case, made a huge, huge mistake. Again, I know you're not a lawyer, but I'm sure you've thought about that as this civil thing has proceeded in New York City.
Well, I mean, look, we've had this conversation, Jim and Marjorie, for how long? You can get dizzy trying to keep track of all the challenges Donald Trump faces that require lawyers, whether they're civil cases, E. Jean Carroll case, another one on the civil side, the criminal indictments. I'm not, I don't have access to all the documents, right? I'm not going to second guess Alvin Bragg. I get your point that, this, how could the civil judge just look at the documents and say, it's clear for me, this is, it's math or it's documentation, where's the proof? And make this finding. Now, Trump's going to appeal it. Trump is going to appeal it. I do think that would be, that's a great conversation among the lawyers, of which I am not one, and you are, if we want to say a former one, maybe we'll call you a reformed
I wouldn't say reformed.
Lawyer.
I'd say former.
I do think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we do. We how many times have we had this conversation? And so I'm talking to Trump voters, not other Republican voters. About half the party doesn't want Trump, but for the half that does want Trump, is there going to be this breakthrough moment? Is there a trapdoor under Donald Trump? And so. My question about this fraud trial is he'll appeal forever. But if in the short term, is there a way, does he lose his right to operate his businesses in New York? Is there any of the sheen, the veneer taken off his brand? I don't know, but that's my question as you travel, because we're in this unprecedented place of a president facing all these court cases, some civil, many criminal, who says he's going to keep running no matter what happens, even if he's convicted.
Yeah, but John, you checked back in with some Iowa and New Hampshire people after the second debate, where obviously Trump did not show up again. Your conclusion, based upon admittedly random sampling, is what?
Trump's holding his own. Trump is holding his own. There's been some progress for Governor Haley, Ambassador Haley. DeSantis is a second choice for a lot of Trump people. Plus, he has his, 8 or 10% or 12%, depending on what state we're talking about here. So far, Trump is holding his own. Jim, the only thing I would add to that, and again, people should not take this for any more than it's anecdotal, but when you do talk to Trump people, many of them do, if you spend 15, 20, 30 minutes with them later in the conversation, back here somewhere is this, nagging thing. For some, it's can he win? For some, it's maybe some of this is right. So it's not happening right now. There's no evidence right now that Donald Trump is at any risk of losing the Republican nomination. However, we have time until we get to January and February. The blur happens, after Christmas. When everybody starts voting, it will be a blur. Any big change would have to happen by then. We would have to see it, if not by Thanksgiving, certainly by Christmas time. I don't see it yet, but when you do talk to people, a lot of them do have this little hesitation. I keep patting the back of my head if you're watching me, because it's back here. It's not up here.
I understand.
But it's back here. And so is it possible that something opens the gate? Possible. Right now, there's no evidence that it's a problem.
Well, one last thing about what may get through, assuming they even hear about it. We all know during the campaign, Donald Trump insulted not only Gold Star family, but he insulted John McCain, kind of a beloved guy, no matter what your politics were. Now, General John Kelly, Brighton guy.
We've had Kaiser Khan on the show, by the
Yep.
way, the father of the young man who lost his life in service,
Yes.
who was ridiculed by Donald Trump.
So people that are in the service or have military connections already know about the things he did in that regard. Now we have General John Kelly, who of course is from Brighton, confirming an earlier report about these insults that Trump is aimed at people who lost their lives or are wounded, calling them suckers and losers, and and of course saying General Milley should be executed, which may have been the impetus for General John Kelly coming out and writing this long thing about the terrible things that Trump had said about military members, not understanding why they would even join the military. And he ended his message with "God help us," which kind of gave me the shivers. But I assume if that may not even break through because people are in their separate news bubbles, or maybe that doesn't do anything either. But a lot of people have strong feelings about the military in the United States, and that's pretty bad to say people that die for their country, a bunch of suckers.
Including Kelly's own kid, by the way.
Right. Look, you raise an interesting point. Again, we have this conversation, can you break through with Trump's voters? I do think this is something that has affected Trump with suburban voters, with swing voters, with people who look at the character and the tone and the language of their president and have decided Donald Trump is just too, A, he's just too coarse, B, he's too mean. That's why he lost the suburbs, both in 2018 when they lost the Congress and in 2020 when he lost his reelection campaign. Does that sustain itself through next November? We'll have this conversation many times. I would just say that, Trump constantly denies this. We've heard him publicly what he has said about John McCain and others, right? And so when you hear what he said privately, it matches pretty much what he said publicly. And Jim, I think, just made the most important point. General Kelly, Chief of Staff Kelly, has 4 stars. He has earned the right. He's earned our respect and the credibility. And he's not only a hero, but he's a Gold Star parent who had to bury a son. So he knows what he's talking about. Mike Pence today was asked about this, and in his words, he said, "I never heard Donald Trump said that, but I have so much respect for John Kelly. I'll leave it at that." I think that's well put.
Yeah. Okay. So what's going on with Matt Gaetz versus House Speaker McCarthy? The showdown between the two of them. Gaetz wants to get rid of McCarthy. What's happening?
This is all going to play out in the next couple hours. They're supposed to start voting. It's the House of Representatives, and obviously you can stall, but the votes were supposed to start somewhere around now, a little after 1:30, at least last time I checked in. And the math, when I checked in, again, I'm on the road, so maybe something has changed, is that McCarthy doesn't have the votes because the Democrats made a decision. His only hope is that Democrats saved him. If there are, the first thing they will do is move to table. Gaetz has filed this, to vacate the speakership motion. So the procedural move is move to table, which means kill it, essentially. Put it off to the side. Take it off the table. Then you have to bring it back up. And McCarthy would need, can only lose a handful, less than a handful of Republican votes to pass that if everybody shows up. And so are there some gimmicks where people could vote present or people could not show up and the math is there? Maybe. But if you just look at the number of Republicans and the number of Republicans who've said they would support Gaetz on this, our Capitol Hill team says that McCarthy's in trouble. That by the end of the day, he may, the votes may cost him his job unless something dramatic happens. So that's very important as a personal story. A Speaker of the House, the third in line to the presidency. It's also just a reminder of since day one, Kevin McCarthy has been living on this tightrope because he keeps having to make deals with people who have no interest in governing to keep his job. It's one of the least productive Congresses in history. And who knows what comes after Kevin McCarthy. All of his deputies say they don't want the job because they're supporting Kevin McCarthy. If the speakership is vacated and he loses his job, then you're going to see, the follow-up circus, if you will, the competition for that job. Although who would want it? Given that, again, in a week when you don't give Matt Gaetz or the Freedom Caucus what they want, they may come back and do it again. It's a great political story. It is horrible for the country.
I should know the answer to this question. Assuming the chair is vacated, as the term of art is, and he's no longer speaker, and then everybody lines up to become his successor, who's the speaker in the interim? Who runs the House of Representatives?
There's just a presiding officer. The clerk essentially runs the House, and there's a presiding officer. Someone goes up there and runs the gavel and everything, but there's no speaker.
So they won't do anything, realistically speaking, during that interim time. If there is an interim time, even less will come out of the House. I assume nothing is what comes out, right?
Yeah, the House is paralyzed. The House is paralyzed. And again, if you're Matt Gaetz or the Freedom Caucus guys, that was kind of your campaign promise, right? Yeah. You don't trust Washington anyway, so we won't get anything done. They're not about, each of them may have one or two local issues or something, but this is not a fight with Kevin McCarthy. I mean, they say it's about getting Democratic votes to keep the government open. Okay, that's their most basic job. And yes, Speaker McCarthy in the end was humiliated into getting Democratic votes, and he had to change his plan to keep the government open. He says if he loses his job, he did the right thing. And he uses selective language, paying the Border Patrol and things like that, but paying everybody, paying all federal employees. But we'll see how it plays out. But yes, an already grossly unproductive Congress would be paralyzed until they get a new speaker, without a doubt.
So John King, I think the conventional wisdom has been until very recently that if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. runs for president, he'll hurt Joe Biden. Now,
as an independent.
Yes. Yeah. And now the thinking is that he could hurt Donald Trump. Do you buy it?
He could hurt him some. I mean, I've met, again, it's anecdotal, but I've met several Trump voters who speak highly of Robert Kennedy. There's one, a fisherman, Lucas Raymond up in New Hampshire, who voted for Trump, in 2016 in the primary, voted for Trump in the general election in 2016, turned off by the chaos of Trump, who thinks, Trump was his insurgent then, doesn't trust politicians, who says he's going to be for Robert Kennedy. So that could be, if you take just that simple math, that could be one former Donald Trump vote in New Hampshire gone, right? So subtract that from Donald Trump. A number of Trump voters we've talked to in Iowa and New Hampshire say they're intrigued by Robert Kennedy. So again, to the point we were making earlier, if there's something that finally peels some of them away from Trump, is it possible they go to Robert Kennedy? Yes. I think the biggest thing here is if Kennedy runs as a third-party candidate. You have Cornel West. We'll see how many state ballots he gets on running as a third-party candidate. Yep. That is a direct threat. That is a direct threat to the Democrats, because it doesn't take much. Look where I am in Milwaukee. If Cornel West gets 1%, 2% in Wisconsin, and a lot of that comes in Madison and Milwaukee, that could flip the state. This is a state that 50, 60,000 votes is probably inside the state. So if we have a number, we all think about, remember the Perot campaign in 1992, and the last time we had a credible third-party candidate who got millions of votes. He got 19 million votes. I never thought we'd see an election like that. If we have a couple or a few smaller third-party candidates who aren't getting 10 or even 5 million votes, but they're getting tens of thousands of votes in the right places, it could impact the math in the end. Think about it. It's been 5 or 6 states deciding the presidency in the last 2 cycles, and 75 to 80,000 votes combined in those 4 or 5 states doing it. So third-party candidates with even just modest support could make the electoral college math state by state more complicated.
Well, by the way, since you said you're in Wisconsin at the beginning, I forgot how narrow the margin was, speaking of what you just said. 20,000 votes out of 3.2 million votes cast between Trump and Biden in 2020.
So imagine if, I don't know where the Kennedy vote would go here. That's one of the reasons we're here, right? We're trying to learn as we go, and we're going to keep coming back over the next 13, 14 months. But, look at Madison, right? Or here in Milwaukee. There's a liberal black base, a progressive black base that thinks Joe Biden hasn't done enough for them, criminal justice reform being one of those issues. I mean, there's just across party lines, what we're finding when we travel is people just disaffected, saying nobody's keeping their promises. Nobody's delivering on what I want. Now, some of that is the hangover of inflation. Some of that here is the hangover of even still the COVID pandemic. It might be an issue like local, they might be mad about local schools. They're mad about they won't put speed bumps in to slow down what they believe is crime in their neighborhoods. It could be any local issues, but people are disaffected and disillusioned. And if they go somewhere else, guess what? That could hurt the president.
Yeah, and RFK Jr. has been featured on conservative media an awful lot. He's getting a lot of play. He's an anti-vaxxer. Right. He writes all these things.
Steve Bannon loves him.
Well, yes. I think Steve Bannon kind of is it hasn't worked as Steve Bannon planned, I don't think, because I think he thought he would be, that he would hurt Biden, not Trump. But things seem to have flipped because RFK is a big anti-vaxxer, even though Trump is the reason we had the vaccine so fast. But in any case.
I think you'll see. That's it. It's an interesting question, right? But part of this phase of the campaign is write down our questions, right? See the state of play today. Write down your questions to see what changed. If you see the anecdotal thing I just talked to you about, Trump people being intrigued by Robert Kennedy, if that becomes more than 2 or 3 people, and it starts to grow, then guess what? Steve Bannon will change his tune pretty quickly. He'll find something. Trust me.
Hey, John, it's wonderful to see you. Good luck in Wisconsin. We're dying to hear your reporting. Thanks so much for your time.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
By the way, while we were talking to John, Jamie, or one of our colleagues, gave us some statements from Hakeem Jeffries, who leads the Democrats in the House. And the question was, would the Democrats get enough concessions from McCarthy to help rescue his speakership? I'll read you a line from Hakeem Jeffries just a few minutes ago. Given their unwillingness, the GOP, to break from MAGA extremism in an authentic and comprehensive manner, House Democratic leadership will vote yes on the pending Republican motion to vacate the chair, meaning remove McCarthy as Speaker. So obviously they have no intention of being his lifeline.
Okay. We've been speaking with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King, host of the Great Reporting Project, All Over the Map. Coming up, a bookend to our opening of the show today, talking about work. We'll end with work too, but based on an idea from our producer, Zoe, whose cat apparently likes the cat TV. She watches soccer games on TV. Did you see that, Jim? Zoe's cat watches soccer games on TV. Anyway, if every weekend this summer and fall is going to be raining, should we allow people to work on weekends and take Tuesday through Thursday off, a kind of a flex time deal for the horrible weather we've had on so many weekends this summer? Flexible work is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Friday, Ask the AG. Andrea Campbell here with us at the library for an hour. Tuesday, Ask the Mayor. Mayor Wu, Michelle Wu, with us for an hour at the library. So, work bookends, as Marjorie said on the radio show today. This weekend's weather is supposed to be complete garbage compared to today and the rest of the work week, which is supposed to be beautiful. We've spent hours and hours and hours on the show talking about the work from home movement. Today, something a little bit different. How about a flexible work week? Something that accommodates your needs as a worker, and maybe stuff like the weather too, like the changing weather too. We asked you earlier about shorter meetings. Now we're going to ask about the importance of flexible hours, especially in our changing climate. The weather forecast this week, sunny and in the 70s and 80s today, except the moment 5 p.m. Friday hits, we'll have clouds and rain all weekend. It's a frustrating weather trend continuing from the summer. According to the Globe, there were just 5 weekends from Memorial Day through the month of September that were precipitation free. So the question is this.
5 weekends.
That's what it said.
Memorial Day to September.
Thank you. 5 weekends.
5 weekends.
That's right. So if we're adapting our work days to accommodate remote work, should we really be focusing on flex hours? Would you work, for example, Saturday and Sunday through lousy weather if you could take Monday and Tuesday off to enjoy what few hours of sunlight we have before it starts setting at 4 p.m. anyway? 877-301-8970. For people not familiar with flexible hours or flex time, this was being discussed and implemented in some fashion in some offices years and years and years before COVID and before anybody thought about working from home. But we really started thinking, as Marjorie said in our staff meeting this morning before the show, about how, in addition to work from home, which is a huge thing for some people, having the ability, particularly for those who aren't lucky enough to be able to do work from home, should they choose, like service workers, etc., with flexible hours where you can accommodate your schedule. It's not just to the climate, even though that is a big thing, to your kids and whatever. Even if you don't have work from home, be something you would embrace and be considered a wonderful, I shouldn't say perk because that makes it sound cheap, but a benefit that your employer could provide for you. The number is 877-301-8970. Can I answer my own question? How much would you love to have had today off? I'm not sure it would work for us. And work Saturday, do a radio show on Saturday when the weather's crap.
Well, I would much rather work in the rain than in the beautiful sunny weather. And when you think about what got canceled this weekend, the Globe had a great piece about it. The Roslindale Porch Fest was big. Family Day in Cambridge Danahy Park. You've probably been to that with your kids. That was canceled. Yeah, the Big E up there in West Springfield.
The attendance was brutal.
It was brutal because of the rain. The Doggy Palooza in Somerville. My daughter was going to go to that with her dog. That was canceled. All sorts of things were canceled. Football games, soccer games. The kids that love to play soccer. The fields were so wet they couldn't play soccer over the weekend. Track meets, all these things. Hispanic Heritage Month has been a big thing this month. A lot of their events had to be canceled. So it really is terrible when it rains on Saturday. You know it's going to rain again this Saturday too. Hopefully it's not going to rain all day. So yeah, it'd be nice to have that flexibility, but it's never going to happen.
But it's not just, I don't,
never gonna happen.
Is work from home ever going to happen?
Well, I thought it was never going to happen either.
And it did, didn't it?
It did happen.
And it not only did, but most people think it's permanently embedded.
Yeah, but the problem with working on Saturdays, there could be 3 people in the office working on Saturday.
Well, obviously, that's like saying you can never work from home because people have to be in the office to be collegial and collaborative. The answer is most workplaces have figured it out. And if people had flexible schedules, then obviously employers would have to figure out how to have required minimum staffing all the time. It is totally workable. And if there was ever a time when employees have the ability to demand more from their employers, as the UAW, as healthcare workers, as a ton of people are doing, now I would love flexible hours. It'd be hard in the radio business, but I would love flexible hours.
You know what happened to the Fluff Festival in Somerville?
No, Fluff, Marshmallow Fluff is founded in Somerville.
That's right. Somerville is the home of Marshmallow Fluff. So in addition to the Dogapalooza event, the Fluff Festival had to be moved from Saturday to Sunday. It's really horrible, especially in the summer, when you wait all week long and it's like 90 degrees, you're sweating to pieces, and then the weekend it pours rain. And can you believe that? 5 weekends from Memorial Day to
But it shouldn't be. By the way, while climate change was the driver for this discussion, or crappy weather versus good weather, how about the fact you can only get an appointment for your kid's doctor on Wednesday? You can't get one on a day that you're off. So I want to take off a Wednesday, and I'll work again on a Saturday. By the way, again, people may not be familiar with the term flex time. This is not a radical concept. It has been around. It has been debated forever. Unfortunately, it reached its high water mark in terms of demand at the time when employers didn't have to give in to anything, as opposed to what happened during COVID when employers were worried that no one was ever going to come back to work, when all of a sudden they're much more accommodating.
I don't want to dwell on this.
Go ahead.
But it is really depressing in like August
Here we go.
and July when it rains all weekend long, and that's the days you have off, and you're planning on going to the beach, and you got the beach chairs and everything going, and you can't get to go.
877-301-8970. Again, Marjorie's obsessed with the weather.
Well, I am
Doesn't
obsessed
have to
with the
just
weather.
be about the weather.
Because
it's personal convenience.
Because one of the things, many things that are horrible about climate change is we're supposed to get wetter and wetter here in the Northeast. So that's really swell. We can look for now. I'm hoping we're going to have the extreme fluctuations. Selfishly, not that I want to have a drought, because that's terrible too. But at least it was a good beach summer last summer.
It's a very healthy
as opposed
attitude.
to this summer that was like a lousy beach day. You can only go to the beach when it's nice and warm out. Barb in the car. What do you think, Barb?
Hey, Barb.
Hi. I'm an HR consultant, so this is kind of my jam.
Thank you.
Love the show.
Thanks.
Thank
you. I work with a lot of national and multinational companies, so I would just laugh at the idea of even talking to somebody in like Germany or Israel or even California about the concept of a weather-driven schedule. So.
Well, how about, as an HR person, consultant, Barb, forget weather. Marjorie's ruined this conversation by bringing, of course I did too, climate change into it. How about the whole concept of flexible time? By the way, it doesn't have to be a Wednesday for a Saturday. I need to take 4 hours off today, and I'll work an extra 4 hours on Thursday night to make up for it. So I have flexible hours. It accommodates my needs. I feel better about your boss, the person you work for in your HR capacity, and it makes my life better. That is a hard sell?
Absolutely not. And it's actually almost required in some states in the U.S. And in Massachusetts, I'm surprised a company would even push back on it. But that's a conversation that if you had in Germany and Israel and California, whatever, they'd be like, of course. So, so paid, personal time off.
Don't the Germans, I don't know enough about Israel, but don't the Germans have a more healthy attitude about work than we do? I mean, aren't they more like in that French mode, where they work to live instead of live to work kind of thing? I think so, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
right.
they have a huge. Their economy is like fantastic. You know what I mean? So they're surviving without the way.
Their economy is healthy. Their economy is healthy, and
their economy
business
is healthy.
environment, and they give you cookies whenever you show up.
They do?
Yeah.
What do you mean they give you cookies
Yeah.
whenever you show up?
She just said it.
You come to work and they stand there with a chocolate chip cookie at the door? What do you mean?
No, less fattening than that, but yeah.
Oh, what kind of cookies, Barb?
What kind of cookies? What kind of question is that?
More like fruit. More like fruit oriented, and
okay,
not some
fruit oriented.
Okay, I got news for you, Barb. To us, fruit is not a cookie. Let me just be totally clear. Thank you much for the call. 877-301-8970.
We do have a texter who works for him or herself, and also sometimes on the weekends. But they're at the beach today. But of course, they're at the beach by themselves because the rest of their friends are all working, so they have no one to go to the beach with.
What, are they pretending like they're working from home kind of thing, and have they brought their computer to the beach, or they took the day?
No, they can set their own schedule.
Well, that's called flex time.
That's called flex time.
Okay. Why are you so resistant to this and so negative about this? It's huge. You're always complaining. I got to rush out of here because I have an appointment. I got to get my hair done. I got to get whatever it is you do.
I'm always getting my hair done.
But wouldn't you feel a lot less stressed if it turns out you had the ability? Again, it's really hard when you have a radio show at a particular time. But if you were in a normal kind of job, wouldn't that make you feel better?
I think it would be a wonderful thing to have know what your job is and know what you
just
need
do it
to get
it done.
and
Exactly.
get it done in the time that
I'll give you a
works for
perfect example. Other than deadlines, the newspaper industry, as a columnist, was sort of a flex time kind of thing.
Well,
right?
yeah, but
as long as you got your story in by 5 o'clock.
But there's almost no columnist. Most everybody else is a reporter or an editor. So I was lucky.
Well, you were a columnist. You remember that?
That's right. I was a columnist, and that was
They
very
give you
lucky.
cookie when you went to the Herald?
There's not that many columnists.
Did they give you a cookie when you walked in the newsroom?
No, they did not give me a cookie when I went to work. No, they did not.
Remember when they found a weapon in the guy's locker at the Herald? Do you remember that? Not a cookie.
There was a gentleman here the other day that was in the press room when
they found the gun in the locker?
Well, it was a murder happened.
Oh, a murder, sorry.
Yeah, there was a murder.
Shouldn't have brought
Someone
it up.
was killed.
Okay, but that's a murder. That's where murder
in the basement of the Herald.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, Colin in Pembroke, thank you for calling.
Hey, Colin.
Hi, how's it going?
Excellent.
Great.
Good. I own my own dog walking company now, but years ago when I was younger, I worked at Starbucks as a barista, and you would almost always work on the weekend because it was busier. So having Tuesday and Wednesday off was great because I could go get anything done and not have to worry about a dozen people blocking my way in the mall or traffic.
That's great.
So, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Don't you think it prolongs your life, too? I mean, to me, at least, it reduces stress level when you don't have to squeeze stuff in, but rather can do it at whatever pace you choose to, no?
Absolutely. You can get an appointment anywhere you need to go or do anything because you can go at, 10 o'clock on a weekday.
You know what you reminded me of? Thank you, Colin, for your call. You know what it reminded me of when he was talking about being a barista at Starbucks, wherever he was? Rideshare drivers. Do you ever talk to your rideshare drivers? I assume you do.
I do, yeah.
Okay, and what do they say when you ask them, how's the job?
They set their own schedule.
They said, I really love setting my own schedule.
Yep.
I'm going to work till 11 o'clock tonight, but it's what I wanted to do. I could see my kids go off to school, or I took them off to school. That's flex time in the modern world in ride sharing, no?
Here's Paul, who says, I'm sorry if this isn't fun for you, but I'm sitting on my new deck enjoying a spectacular day outside with Pepper the Wonder Dog, getting absolutely nothing done. There's plenty of time to spend in the basement making stuff when it's not a spectacular day like today is. I mean it is kind of a nice thing. What's really awful is the weekends when you made all these plans.
We back to climate change?
Well, I mean, it's not just, it's sometimes climate change and no climate change. It rains on the weekends. We've had an awful lot of rain in the summer. There's a bit of, what do we have, 40 inches of rain compared to what we usually have, like 20 inches of rain or something like that. But it is really upsetting, I think, when you plan all these things. People get married usually on the weekends. Who wants to get married in the rain? Beth in Braintree, thank you for calling.
Hello, Beth.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to call about the flexible hours of working weekends. I'm retired now. But I worked 40 years as a nurse, and we were required to work every other weekend. That was just the standard. And there were a lot of pros for that during the week. Like your previous call from Pembroke said, you can get a lot done because you're not waiting in line. You can get appointments easier. What I loved it when my kids were small, I had a day during the week without having to worry about taking care of kids. It was to myself. Even if I was just at home doing housework or grocery shopping, I could do it alone. It was great. But the downside of that was that You know, my whole family schedule had to revolve around my schedule.
Well, see, the difference is, Beth, what we're talking about is the power in the hands of the employee, you as a nurse, to decide when you want to work, when you not want to work, and maybe it's a weekend, maybe not. You had no choice. That was not a voluntary thing. That was a mandatory schedule deal, right?
It could be voluntary if I chose to make it that. You know, you could be a per diem employee.
I see.
And you could make your own hours.
Beth, thank you for the call.
Thanks.
Our number is 877-301-8970. The question is, after all these rainy weekends this summer in Boston have kind of ruined everybody's weekend plans, how would you feel if you had an option to go into work on a rainy day and stay home on the sunny day, like some of our texters are saying that they are going to the beach today, or they're out in their new deck today, or they're out in the backyard today? Would it make your life easier if you did it that way? And I was talking to that woman that called before that does the international
HR stuff.
You know, one of the things that's been great about the pandemic is that it has made people, well, there are some upsides to the pandemic, and one of them is it's made people rethink work, right? People are not so willing to work like 12 hours a day for no pay. I mean, that's, people complain people aren't going to work, well, because they had crummy jobs with lousy pay before. So people are rethinking these things, and I don't know, I don't think it's going to happen. But then again, I didn't think we'd ever get flexible schedules again. But
well, wait a second. Let me give you another example. Beyond work from home, which all of us thought would never happen, or none of us thought would ever happen, and it has, and I think it's baked in, as I say. 4-day work week, when I used to do shows with you always hated, oh, we're not going to do that again. Would you not agree the 4-day work week is closer at hand now than it ever was because of the pandemic?
Yeah, the UAW is trying to get a 4-day work week.
I know they are. And whether they get it or not, the reality is employers are taking it seriously now, and I think flex time should be part of the discussion. That's all I'm saying.
Here's a great point from one of the texters. Flex time is a huge game changer for working parents because schools randomly release mid-afternoon. I think they do that for professional development.
Yeah.
They release mid-afternoon a few times a month, which is impossible to coordinate childcare. And that's a great point, too. If you had more flexibility, nurses, the nurse that called before, that's why nurses work 12-hour shifts a lot on the weekends. So they can be home more with their kids during the week. But I'm talking about, I guess, having a schedule that's flexible enough that you could look at the weather report and decide which days you wanted to go in and which days you wanted to take
that's
off.
whatever the criterion is. If you have the power in your hands as a worker to decide, as long as you get the work done, that you do the work. So speaking of 4-day work week, which I snuck right in there, you would agree that we are, with the shot of this happening on a widespread basis, is greater now than it's been in our lifetime, yes?
Yes, because I think people can't get their workers to come back to work. We talked a couple of weeks ago about how people were putting in fire pits and meditation rooms and all this kind of thing to try to get people back to work. They're having difficulty getting people back to work. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are the days that a lot of employers want people to come to the office, but they're having difficulty getting them in. Ronnie and Randolph, what do you think?
Hello, Ronnie.
Hi, I'm calling and concerning the job sharing and flexible hours.
Yes.
Years ago, once my children were in school, in kindergarten, first grade, I joined a company that had a program for mother's hours and job sharing. So I would work for 4 hours, and then the next 4 hours would be another mom that would share the job. And it was perfect for both of us. I could make appointments. I could get my children off to school. I had a set schedule, and it worked great.
Well, job sharing is a variation on what we're talking about here, by the way.
Exactly.
It allowed you to have flexible hours. And again, that was a good story. Ronnie, thank you for sharing it with us. We appreciate it.
Here's a texter. One of the perks of working as a poor freelancer is we set our own schedule. Today, I'm chilling and working like it's a weekend, but yeah, we're all poor, so we pay for that day.
Well, yeah, there's an underside too. 877-301-8970 is our number. We only have a couple minutes left. We're really talking about flex time. If you want to weigh in on the 4-day work week, which is my dream crusade, I should say, we should talk more about that too, because it really is within reach, and employers, for the most part, are willing to make compromises they were never willing to make before. Not only because the things they said they couldn't do, they can and they work, but secondly, because employees have so much more leverage than we have had for ages.
Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Those are the perfect days to have to come into the office. Then you'd have more flexibility.
Why don't you become a firefighter? Do you know firefighters generally work like 3 whatever, a 24-hour day,
yeah.
2 24-hour days, or whatever the hell they do.
Yeah, I think it's a little late for them to become a firefighter.
You think it is?
But they do have great schedules, and they can become
Flight
great
attendants?
cooks working in the firehouse, and then they can perfect their skills, and they can have other careers outside. A lot of firefighters have second jobs. Sarah from Medford, thank you for calling.
Hey, Sarah.
Oh, hey, hello. I just wanted to call in and say I've been in corporate America for about 25 years now, and I've had the flexible work schedule almost on a don't ask, don't tell. But you got the job done. It allowed me to be a mother, work full time. Sometimes I'd be up, but I was able to take my kids to the doctor and just make it happen. And I got to say, my company was supportive and knew I could get the job done. So that has been my life, and I feel very thankful for it. And I hope after COVID, especially women, can have that.
But that was a great call. And we should do our mandatory, like when we talk about work from home. Obviously, this doesn't work for every profession. It wouldn't work for our profession, for example. We have a show every day from 11 to 2. But the thing you said before, which is what Sarah just said, in so many occupations, the issue should be, can you get the work done? And if you can get the work done and you don't have client interfacing or whatever it is, or you got to be at a meeting or whatever, the notion that that's the only criteria that matters, getting it done, the production, and you do it whenever the spirit moves you, should be what drives so many of these jobs.
Okay. Like I said, the one good thing about the pandemic, well, there are a couple of good things. Is this going to be
climate change again?
No.
Okay.
That for a while, we realized that we didn't have traffic. That was the one thing. That's all gone. That's all over with now. But I think we've realized, people are rejiggering their whole attitudes about work in the United States of America, which I think is a wonderful thing, because people had to work too many hours with no flexibility and no discussion.
Well, we started this by saying work from home is a thing now. It is not an outlier. It is a thing. And it is here to stay. What was that great line in the Globe that I've quoted 40 times last 2 weeks? We're as back to work as we're ever going to be. And I think for the most part, that is totally true.
Okay, I'm going to talk about tomorrow's show, but while I'm talking about tomorrow's show, look for where on YouTube, how people can see the interview yesterday with Nancy Gertner.
Can you post it? And Larry Tribe.
And Larry Tribe, which is a really great interview, not only about former President Trump's legal woes, but about Lawrence Tribe's great idea, I think, about getting money to Ukraine.
Hundreds of billions.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. Okay, tomorrow we're going to be joined by our NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Harvard National Security expert Juliet Kayyem, naturalist and Cy Montgomery, who's got this new book out about turtles, which someone texted me and says selling like hotcakes. Her book about, I think it's time and turtles.
She's a best-selling author. I mean, she's a big time.
And it's Fat Bear Week. Did you know about that, Jim?
No.
Well, Cy Montgomery is going to clue us in on what Fat Bear Week is all about. NPR's Morning Edition co-host Steve Inskeep has this new book out, Differ We Must, How Lincoln Succeeded in a Divided America. He's got chapters divided into conversations with different people with whom Lincoln had a difficult relationship, including his wife, Mary Todd.
And he thinks it could be instructive for today's divided nation as well.
And a live performance from Marshall Mayberry. He's the lead actor in a black and queer adaptation of Hamlet, Fat Ham. Jim and I both got to see it. It was absolutely a riot.
Calderwood, go see it.
Yes, now playing, that's right, the Huntington Theater, which is at the Calderwood now in the South End, or at least that part of the theater is there. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineers, John LeClaw Parker, our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. We have a 3-hour one and a succinct half-hour one.
Succinct.
If you want to listen to Boston Public Radio when you can't listen to us live or stream us online. Special thanks to the BPL team today, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Brad Lewis, and Angelica Marrero. I'm Marjorie.
I just want to say also, Michael Cox, the commissioner of the Boston Police Department, had to cancel today. He is rescheduled for 11 o'clock on Monday. He'll join us.
Did you find our YouTube thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
Whatever, it's not up. But whatever, go to youtube.com/GBH News and search, what is it, all videos or something? Whatever, it's all videos. It's on the homepage under Boston Public Radio. YouTube.com/GBH News. You'll learn a lot from two people who I think are as well informed about these issues as anybody in our country. I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thanks again for tuning in
today.
Thank you all.
Hope
you can tune in again tomorrow. Thank you to people that came down to the
Thank
Boston
you so
Public
much.
Library, and have a great day.
Thank you.